I am? Sorry. Lily Orchard crap. They will ban Dragon Ball. Why Jurassic Park never went full horror? I don't think Jurassic Park was supposed to be horror. Ever. I don't think it was even partially horror. Okay, where's the Lily Orchard video? Where's the Lily Orchard? Don't worry, there's a search option. The Lily... The Lily Orchard saga. Lily Orchard doesn't understand writing. A response to CD calls writing advice.
Look, I didn't really want to talk about Lily Orchard ever.
It's 2 hours, 26 minutes. Perfect. Oh! Well, thank you. Thank you, Potato Face. Now I know you're here with me. To support me in my time of need. Oh, it's already on screen. I thought I'd have to put it on screen, but no, apparently it's already on. So you said some Valheim is in the cards? Oh yeah, we're gonna need it after this. We are gonna desperately need it after this. Oh man, I'm kind of thinking some house or whatever, or something, you know? House or... I also want to train my knife skills and bow skills. Hello chat, how are you all doing? We're watching some SLOP. Maybe we'll get 70 viewers again. Who knows?
Look, I didn't really want to talk about Lily Orchard ever again.
That's a lie. He wanted to. How many views did this get? Oh yeah, 850,000. You definitely wanted to, okay? I hate it when content creators cannot own it up and say, "Oh, I really didn't want to do this, fellas. I am so forced into this. Trust me." No, of course you wanted to do this.
Again, but a lot of people, both on Tumblr and Discord, asked me to respond to Lily Orchard's writing advice. And I figured, why not? Okay?
Oh, writing advice. Cool.
Lily Orchard, a few years ago now, wrote a bunch of writing tips on Twitter. Now, of course, this was meant to be advice, not really anything super strict. It was more like a bit of fun, kind of a trolley post, maybe, but people took it very seriously. And as someone who is a writer himself, I'm something of a writer myself, I read these initial tips on Twitter when they came out, and I thought, wow, these sound terrible and are not at all good advice for any writer. I'm not going
to
act like I am all original for saying this. The Dire Gentlemen, so We Are Not Alive, I think they're called now. They did a great video breaking this down. Actually, 2 great videos breaking it down. So
why do people hate this poor woman? I see sexism, okay? I'm sensing some real sexism about...
I'm not really offering much to the conversation that probably hasn't already been said. In fact, before watching this, I decided not to watch any previous response to it because I wanted to kind of go in with my own perspective. If there is overlap, a lot of common issues with her advice, so what are you going to do? Now, I'm going to read them live. There is no script. I did not think about this before. There's no pre-planning. In fact, I deliberately avoided looking at her tips until just now when the camera started rolling.
Why... Isn't that from like many years ago? What's the point? You don't even know if she still, I don't know, thinks the advice is good herself.
Sure, is a great idea.
Maybe she thinks the advice is crap now herself as well. Maybe she's like, I don't endorse any of this advice anymore. So what now?
Will not result in any negative.
Al, what do you mean? You recommended this. You recommended. You ordered me to do this. Okay, you ordered me to do this content. I didn't, moron. You decided to watch that. I told you to watch the previous video. Wow. Wow. So aggressive for no reason. Look at that. Look at that bigot. Transphobia, sexism, transsexism, and all that stuff. Directed at me, moron. He's calling me a moron, knowing that I'll just take it because I'm a delicate flower and all that stuff.
Content whatsoever. But
I'm like, hey, thank you for recommending me this content creator. No, you rancid whore. I never did that, moron, idiot. Shut up. I'm like, whoa. Whoa. Why the aggressiveness? Why did I do to you? What have I ever done to you? Actually, not to be actually, sexism can be a sexism regardless of gender or sex. There can be two biological males that identify as men and they can be sexist towards each other, actually. Was manageable until a few days ago. Finally had to go in. Oh. Only happens in theory.
Bear with me here.
Yeah, but theory is... You don't even know what theory is in science.
Here's an authentic reaction to Lily Orchard's 100 writing tips. By the way, her Twitter account's been deleted, so all of this was archived. There you go. Tip number 1. Don't worry about spoilers. If your story is good, spoilers aren't going to make it any less enjoyable.
Why is that advice number 1? Why? That is a very weird advice number 1. Why is this number 1 advice for writing? Spoilers make a story less enjoyable. That just means you were relying on cheap shock value as a shortcut. That's not true at all. That doesn't sound right at all. Right off the bat, actually. Like if you write a murder mystery and before ever even reading anything, everybody knows who the murderer is. It's not you relying on cheap shock value. The whole book hinges on not exactly knowing who the murderer is and kind of trying to figure it out as you read, no?
If spoilers make a story less
enjoyable... That's stupid advice. That's number 1 is stupid.
That just means you are relying on cheap shock value as a shortcut. That's not really true, though, is it?
No, it's not true at all. Murder mystery is the easiest example to go to.
Well, a mystery requires you to...
Oh, there you go. That is such a no-brainer. I really hope Lily Orchard never finds out about Lucy. Why is that?
Figure out the mystery. The idea of a strong mystery involves you trying to look at the elements at play and figure it out for yourself. If you know the answer, you can still enjoy a mystery, but part of the fun is the puzzle pieces of it.
Yeah, exactly. You're trying to figure out who the killer is, and if you just know it right off the bat, then it kind of deflates the pleasure of reading, right? Oh yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. Lily Orchard. Is Lily Orchard still a thing? Do they actually still do anything? Content or whatever?
Trying to figure it out for yourself. Certain stories invite you to try to find a twist. And certain movies are meant to be watched twice. Once without knowing and once with...
Yeah. I don't know anything about... I only know the name, Lily Orchard.
Knowing. I think the Sixth Sense, when you don't know...
That's how I default to when I don't know anything about a person besides their name. And now I know there's some allegation of sexual assault.
Twist is a great experience because you realize you're not picking up on any of the hints. You know, there are a lot of scenes that directly tell you what's happening, but because you're looking at it through a different perspective, that's not always the case. And a great movie that really does rely on a lot of twist after twist after twist is the underrated horror film Lake Mungo. And this is not a film that uses heavy twists. Each twist is kind of light, but every 20 minutes the film feels like a different genre. At first it's a human tragedy story, then it's a ghost story, then it's like sort of a ironic little mystery, and then it's a human horror story. And it keeps shifting to and from, and it only shifts that way because you're not prepared. The whole idea of that film is you see what you want to see, and they show you everything in a couple shots. Every single twist is shown in a few of the shots of the film, but because your eyes are directed towards one way, you're missing the obvious thing happening just on the other side of the camera, of the other side of the shot. It's really incredible.
I should watch this movie. It sounds interesting, actually.
Storytelling especially as well. I would say a book like House of Leaves only works if you're discovering it along the way. Because of the way it's written.
It's ass? Are you actually saying it's ass, or are you just saying it to say it? Have you actually watched it?
It's hard to really spoil House of Leaves. It's so dense with meaning on every single page. So when you read each and every piece of the story, you're still putting it together. You're going, wait, what's this component? What's this mean? How does this fit in with everything else? It's really great storytelling in a way that I think that's unmatched. Yeah, so I think some stories, of course, you can be spoiled and it's fine. Like Shakespeare, for example. A lot of Shakespeare classes, they spoil the story before you even start reading it so you can follow along what's going on. I mean, Romeo and Juliet spoils its ending in the opening couplet. And because of that, it's fine. The tragedy is knowing it's inevitable. Cowboy Bebop basically spoils the end of its last episode from the very beginning. It's foreshadowed so heavily because the inevitability is what kind of drives the narrative. But the truth is that different stories use shock for different reasons. Now, of course, some stories do use twists for a cheap little thrill. I think, for example, the Saw films, after a while, got a little repetitious with their twists because it kind of was like, okay, oh, here's a twist. Oh, it changes everything. Oh, it's kind of a cheap little device to get butts in seats to find out the next twist this time. It's a little goofy, but like, again, it doesn't ruin the film. It's just kind of like, whatever, it's there, you know. So yeah, I think if you over-rely on twists as like the thing that only matters, yeah, you can have some issues. But it's not a hard and fast rule. It's more of a, like most of these opinions that Lily has, it's more, yes, sometimes, but other times not so much. All right, tip 2. The middle point of a story is the best time to get a main couple together. Are you working on a 5-season show? Put your main couple together halfway through season 3. The finale is the worst time because we don't get any time to enjoy the payoff. Like,
not every stories need to have couples to begin with.
Lily's last tip, yeah, sometimes, other times no. Again, it depends on the narrative we're talking about.
What if the story is about the couple getting together and they just get together at the very end? Because that was the whole point of the story. After all, you don't need the payoff. You just want to know if they get together or not. The payoff is insignificant.
Of this would be something like Spider-Man. I think Spider-Man honestly benefits from Peter Parker being in a relationship with his love interest. The fact that Spider-Man keeps backtracking with Mary Jane, trying to bring Peter into like a high school life again, or like a swinging bachelor life again, it's kind of exhausting. I honestly love when Mary Jane and Peter Parker were married in the 90s. There was some really great stories with great human conflicts and drama that worked really well. And I really like any story where they go, well, what about when Peter Parker has kids with Mary Jane? You see him mature, grow up. I love that stuff. It's so great. And I do think that sometimes these love stories drag on a little too much. An example that comes to mind is Twilight, where they drag out the love conflict for so long, and you're like, okay, come on, get to the point already. Let's go. We're running out of time. But other things benefit greatly from having a love story that does take a little longer. For example, Pride and Prejudice would not work if the love story was resolved halfway through. The halfway point is actually where the build-up for the tension kind of reaches its climax, where the turning point is with Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy.
I have fought against my better judgment, my family's expectation, the inferiority of your birth, my rank and circumstance, all these things, and I'm willing to put them aside and ask you to end my agony.
I don't understand.
I love you.
Because the original story Pride and Prejudice is built on the idea that Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet, they're not seeing eye to eye. One is too proud, one is too prejudiced. I mean, I think Elizabeth is prejudiced and Mr. Darcy is too proud. And because of that, they have to overcome their own personal arc before they can ever get together. And that's really good storytelling. Alternatively, some stories have them get together very early on, and that's actually a bad thing for the plot, because then it kind of dilutes the tension. It dilutes the conflict that the writer is setting up. And other times, the love interest doesn't really matter. The love story is irrelevant, and it's not a big part of the conflict, and they can resolve that whenever, and it really wouldn't change anything in the story. I think, again, saying something as a hard and fast rule when it's just a preference is a little short-sighted, because stories depend on different components at different points in time.
And some stories don't involve even couples.
Keep going with it. Okay, tip number 3. Friends to lovers is better than enemies to lovers every time. Again, that's a preference. I have no strong opinions there. A love story is a love story. It all depends on execution. If a story is done well, it's good. Now, I personally do love Friends to Lovers, so I'm not even saying I disagree with you, Lily. I'm just saying it's kind of, again, as a rule, no, it's just a preference. And hey, you're allowed your preferences. I'm not going to argue that. I think both can work really well, depending on the execution and the narrative. Tip 4. Victims of abuse moving away from negative impacts of their abuse, i.e. Zuko, and becoming healthier are not redemption arcs.
Okay.
Hello? Zuko here.
Yeah, but Zuko also has a redemption arc.
I thought I had lost my honor, and that somehow my father could return it to me. But I know now that no one can give you your honor.
So Zuko has multiple arcs that take place at the same time. He is moving away from negative influences and becoming a healthier person, but he's also redeeming himself for the negative actions.
Yeah, definitely. There's a redemption
time when he was the bad guy. Lily is acting like it's one or the other when actually it could be both at the same time. So this already, I think, kind of conflates two separate things that can both overlap, both take place at once, but they're two different arcs.
Hello.
So I don't really agree with that. I think Lily is shortchanging Avatar by conflating two separate arcs Zuko undergoes that are interconnected, that do impact each other, but they're two separate currents. I also think it is maybe a little negative to imply that moving away from negative influences is a redemption arc. But again, Lily, one of your least favorite cartoons of all time, She-Ra, does that. She-Ra is all about deprogramming from religious ideologies that kind of affect your worldview. And Andy Stevenson, of course, lifted from real life experience. He grew up in a household that was very religious, that did instill toxic beliefs that caused him to, I guess, delay his personal identity for a while because he had to deprogram. She-Ra channels a lot of that into it.
I need deprogramming.
To note, hey, you can do both.
That's
Okay,
right.
5.
Deprogram this.
Heroes refusing to kill villains who have shown to be actively trying to murder people isn't noble, it's enabling.
Yeah, but they're throwing shade on Batman. Batman's one rule, to not kill. The one non-killing rule.
What are you talking about? So, okay, this, again, depends on the execution. Lily has a weird thing where she hates any story where the bad guy is allowed to live.
Her approach to the necessity of violence was to claim that it was never the answer and brand the only character who didn't follow that philosophy as evil, which is wrong at every possible scale of resolution.
She hates Batman for that reason, but...
There you go. I knew it. I knew Batman would get some hate.
She fails to understand why these characters don't kill people. A lot of them don't want to kill anyone. Like, it's not easy, you know?
Billy believes victims should kill. Oh.
A lot of these characters...
I don't think there's I don't know. I don't think victims of crime should be the ones to judge, jury, and execute the perpetrators. There's a really big conflict of interest there. Right? Hot take?
ethically would feel horrible about it. Like even Spider-Man, for example, when the Green Goblin kills Gwen Stacy, he is ready to just murder Norman, but he stops because he's horrified by the idea. It's not about nobility. It's about ethically crossing a line you're not comfortable crossing, whereas other characters have no issue with it. For example, Wonder Woman with the Maxwell Lord storyline.
I mean, Batman started out as a person that killed. Batman used to... You remember those early Batman comics from, I don't know, 30s or 40s when there were those villains that he just... he put a rope around their neck and he just hanged them by his plane. The Joker actually was killed, yeah. The Purple Gloves Batman was a killer and used a gun, I think.
He has a whole big plan. I forget the specifics of it, but the only way to stop him is to kill Maxwell Lord. And none of the other heroes want to do that. But Wonder Woman just walks up and snaps Maxwell Lord's neck around. Because it's not a good option, but it's the only option that we could do in a timely manner. But someone like Batman, for example... It
wasn't about timely manner, actually. I know that story. I know why Wonder Woman killed Maxwell Lord. It wasn't about a decision in a timely manner. It was a matter of he had control over Superman. He would always have the control over Superman. He manipulated things behind the scenes for a long time, even though he was first written as a comedic character. And he told her straight up, I'll have control over him forever. There's nothing you can do to end that control. And she asked him with the lasso of truth of whatever, so he didn't lie. So it was about long-term solutions rather than a in-the-moment, quick-thinking solution. There you go. My comic book credentials.
I think is what Lily's really going after. Batman doesn't kill, not because it's noble, but because he's afraid of what he'd become if he ever crossed.
Also, there are stories that explore the whole Batman not killing. Like Batman Under the Red Hood. You know, the Robin that got killed by the Joker and got revived in the Lazarus Pit, came back as the Red Hood and was really salty about the fact that Batman does not kill and would not kill the Joker. And Batman sort of explains his whole thing. It's not like it's unexplored in the stories themselves.
Line.
All I've ever wanted to do is kill him.
There you go. That's the exact story. The Red Hood.
Day doesn't go by when I don't think about subjecting him to every horrendous torture he's dealt out to others. But if I do that, I'll never come back.
You see, Batman isn't doing it because he's a noble person. He's doing it because he thinks he's only one step away from being as bad as his villains. That's the thing. Batman, and it's not something he does because, oh, you know, I can't do it, it's the wrong thing. No, it's because he's afraid of being a villain himself. And he thinks that if he ever crossed that line, it would become...
He watched and now flexing on us. LOL. You got me. You got me. It's the only way for me to be able to say anything meaningful, okay? I'm all decrepit and washed out. If I didn't pre-watch everything I did, then what would I even have left in my life? Okay? Nothing. There would be nothing. Nothing. I'd be nothing.
Too easy for him to just keep crossing it. And other times, it's because of personal attachment. For example, Luke Skywalker can kill thousands of stormtroopers. He blows up the Death Star and doesn't have a single thought about anyone who's on it. I mean, why should he? It's war. But he doesn't want to kill his father because he loves his dad. He wants to save his dad from the dark side. So
it's okay. It's fine. He balanced it out by wanting to kill his nephew. He totally balanced out the whole not wanting to kill his dad by deciding that he wanted to kill his nephew, whom I guess he did not love as much. Yeah, we're going back to our little conversation about Luke from the Last Jedi. Two-Face often believes that what he's doing is fair. I mean, he pretty much always believes that.
That's one example of a reason why someone would want to kill someone. Not about nobility, about saving someone who matters to you. I think Lily is shortchanging the motivations as to why a character would not want to take a life because it's the easy option in one case. And again, sometimes it is enabling. Again, Batman does get criticized by Jason Todd directly for his decision to not kill the Joker. And you know what? Jason Todd's not wrong. He's very justified his perspective. But Batman's reasoning also makes sense in a tragic sort of way. All right, let's keep going. Tip 6. Two women kissing in the last episode of a show after 4 to 5 seasons of trying to murder each other isn't revolutionary, it's fetishized abuse and violence. Is it? Listen, my copy of Sword Lesbians over there would say otherwise. And again, you're talking about She-Ra. Again, it always comes back to the 3 things that Lily Orchard hates. She-Ra, Steven Universe, and whatever popular thing. Oh, and Korra, I guess, because that's one of the more popular videos as well.
These 5 series are often treated as the pioneers of gay rep in Western cartoons, the big boundary pushers who set the stage for everyone else. But all of them have some pretty egregious flaws that could cause some people to argue their importance, or
Thank you for the $5, Steven Universe. I have not seen Steven Universe. Owl House is kind of cool. I've seen She-Ra. I've not seen Gravity Falls. I've seen Legend of Korra. Here's my 2 cents. Who gave Batman the authority to kill? Me. Copies of what? What do you mean, copies of what?
to discount them entirely. The fact that anyone ever looked at this shit and thought to praise it as a good thing should be an embarrassment for everyone. I'd actually like a story that took something like what happens in She-Ra seriously, seeing someone fleeing across...
Yeah. All right, let's keep going. Tip 6. Two women kissing in the last episode of a show after 4 to 5 seasons of trying to murder each other isn't revolutionary, it's fetishized abuse and violence. Is it? Listen, my copy of Sword Lesbians over there would say otherwise.
Oh, the lesbians.
And again, you're talking about She-Ra. Again, it always comes back to the 3 things that Lily Orchard hates. She-Ra, Steven Universe, and whatever popular thing. Oh, and Korra, I guess, because that's one of the more popular videos as well.
These 5 series are often treated as the pioneers of gay rep in Western cartoons, the big boundary pushers who set the stage for everyone else. But all of them have some pretty egregious flaws that could cause some people to argue their importance, or others to discount them entirely. The fact that anyone ever looked at this shit and thought to praise it as a good thing should be an embarrassment for everyone. I'd actually like a story that took something like what happens in She-Ra seriously, seeing someone fleeing across enemy lines to get away from their psychotically possessive sibling until they're collapsing in front of their new friends, trembling and begging for help. But watching one of the supposed landmark LGBT cartoons end with all that abuse and trauma bonding and unhealthy quasi-incestuous attachment being validated in the end was one of the most profoundly nauseating things I've ever seen put to screen.
There's nothing wrong with that. Again, it all depends. Why are they trying to kill each other? Are they soldiers on opposite ends of a war? Or is their combat kind of like flirting? A lot of characters, when they fight, there is a flirtatiousness to it.
I'm indifferent, 2 friends, 2 enemies with enemies, 2 lovers. I mean, depends on the execution, as with everything. A key personality trait of Lily is that she sees herself as a victim no matter what. Oh. Damn. I don't know, it depends on the execution. Sometimes it's...
And there is sort of the, he got away this time, and that kind of a smirk and a grin, looking forward to the next occasion where they fight. That's fun. You know, there's obviously warmth there. And there's also the idea of the noble adversary. You know, if they're different sides of a war, but they're ideologically very similar, you know, there are factors sometimes outside
like
of
the enemies to lovers depends on the whole... Isn't there a whole saying, love and hate are 2 sides of the same coin?
Characters' decisions that lead to them being in conflict. That's interesting, especially if neither party wants to fight. A good example that comes to mind, and again, I noticed how they said women kissing, not men kissing, so I guess it doesn't count if gay characters are having their repressed sexual tension against each other. She'd hate Gundam. I'm just saying, half of that show is like, would be solved if like Amora Ray and Char just kissed already. But I digress. Again, there's other circumstances at play. Sometimes it is abusive, and that is a fair point to Lily. Sometimes there are cases where the writers are fetishizing violence between these two characters. And that's not okay. That's bad. Bad writing, I would say, in my opinion. But it's also not always the case, and to make a broad statement that says all cases of this are abusive, again, you have to take each story on a case by case.
I don't know. When I think advice about writing, I don't think literally, insert this trope in this part of the story, or never do this or never do that. When I think of advice about writing, I think more about how to break your writer's block, how to organize your ideas, how to brainstorm about what you want to write about, how to properly choose the topic that you want to talk about, how to construct your world, how to choose if you want to do a character-driven story or a world-driven story, stuff like that. This is what I think of when I think of writing advice. Not really this micromanaging. When two characters kiss in this act is bad. It's I don't know.
Basis. I know this is kind of a shitpost, but even still, you're talking about She-Ra as a rule that an example of She-Ra that all other things should follow, which I think is messy. 7. Twitter is not an appropriate place to reveal story details. The appropriate place is in the work itself. And you know what?
Sure.
Rare Lily win. I agree with her on this one. Totally agree with Lily. 100%. Lily, Hip 7? Yeah, I'm with you on that one. The story should be the case where all of the answers are revealed. Not just Twitter. There was, when Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker came out, Palpatine's message was revealed in frickin' Fortnite.
At last, the work of generations is complete.
You know, it was an Easter egg in Fortnite. I don't play Fortnite. I'd have no idea this thing was happening. Why would you put a major plot detail in Fortnite? It's ridiculous. No.
God.
So yeah, I get that. No, Lily, you're right about this one. No argument there.
I just learned about it now.
When a character's body count is over 10,000 innocent lives, then that character is no longer redeemable. And I do want to add tip 9 into this one because it ties in with tip 8. 9. Tip 8 does not apply to characters for whom making them the villain was a stupid, idiotic idea, i.e. Sylvanas Windrunner was the WoW character, I guess. At that point, it's just a character derailment. I don't care about Sylvanas Windrunner. I have no opinion on her.
I only know Sylvanas from Warcraft 3. I don't really know what happened to her in World of Warcraft.
Oh, I can't really speak to that. I played WoW years ago. I have barely any memory of the plot. I remember the orcs were cool. I remember the Lich King was cool, but I don't remember anything else. So I can't speak to that specifically.
Has not played the RTS.
But the fact is that you found an exception to your advice very quickly. When the character is written to be bad, it's derailment. Well, what does that mean? Also, the question is, does the character directly involved in the violence? So is this character going like a Jason Voorhees? He's going from door to cabin, taking down lives one by one with his bare hands? Or is it more like a catalyst? Again, in my recent video on Great Villains, I just mentioned John Hammond, who is the antagonist of Jurassic Park in the film and the villain of Jurassic Park in the book. He is directly involved with many lives being lost because he funded the creation of dinosaurs. There is something to be said about the guy who designed something. There's a great movie by Hayao Miyazaki, The Wind Rises, where it focuses on a very
like this movie a lot.
Engineer.
I really like The Wind Rises.
Planes to fly, and so when World War II started, he was commissioned to make these planes. He got to fulfill his dream, but his dream became a nightmare when he realized the planes he was designing were being used for war and for the deaths of tens of thousands of people. Is it impossible for someone like him to be redeemed, even though he was directly involved?
I heard people say that this movie was boring, but screw them. This is a really nice movie.
The actual deaths of real-life people? Miyazaki didn't seem to think so, because, he looked at the humanity of the situation.
It's just profoundly fucking stupid. However, It is not my or anybody else's job to hold her hand through her own myopia. If someone calls Sugar a fascist because of what they saw in Steven Universe, then that is a rod she created for her own damn back. She made the decision to give the diamonds a galaxy-wide body count.
I would say there is only one boring and bad Ghibli film, and that's sadly Irithisia. I don't think I've seen this one. I really like that Ghibli movie about the girl that had depression. When Marley was here, I really enjoyed that one. When Marley was here, I really enjoyed the twist at the end. It's such a great movie, such a heartwarming. That's such an nice movie. When Marley was there.
And spend an extreme amount of time talking about how sad they are. And every attempt to address this since has just been to shift the blame onto somebody else. See, it wasn't their fault. It was all White Diamond. They were only following orders. Wait.
Again, they are characters who may be responsible for thousands of deaths, but it's not really their fault. Or maybe they did it under unusual circumstances. Again, although Orson Scott Card is not a good person at all, Ender doesn't intentionally kill all those aliens. He is tricked by the government into killing them. And he spends the rest of the stories of that series kind of trying to figure out, is it possible to be redeemed after committing such an awful xenocide? And that's a much higher body count than 10,000.
Hello.
Stories can be built around that concept, and your opinions may vary.
Yeah, like with Luke von Fabre from Tales of the Abyss, who was responsible for the death of many people while he was trying to save them, and he had to live with it.
Stories. Is it possible to seek redemption after doing something so impossible? It's a tragedy that but admittedly, a lot of writers screw up the narrative. I think of the Shadowversity novel he did, Shadow of the Conqueror, I think it's called.
Oh my god, Shadowversity.
Where the whole story is, will this terrible man be able to redeem himself? He's so sorry he committed these awful crimes. He feels so bad about it, but the story is like fetishizing his military conquests and everything every step of the way. So, yeah, no, he's not going to get redeemed. He's awful. Not a good writer either. So, again, It depends on the writer, it depends on the work. Let's keep going. 10. Everything in a story is there because the creator wished it to be there. Trying to explain away bigoted story decisions using world building is a fallacy because you put it there to begin with. Again,
that is weird. This is a weird advice because you can talk about bigotry in your stories. You can create a world that is bigoted if you want to talk about bigotry in your story. Yeah, you put bigotry on your story because the point of the story is to explore bigotry, I guess.
Yeah, another Lily Orchard win. So she's got 2 so far. Good job, Lily.
No, I have contention with this one, actually. Like, there are ways to interpret
Everything
this.
in a story is there because the creator wished it to be there. Trying to explain...
What are bigoted story decisions? I don't know.
Using world building is a fallacy because you put it there to begin with. Again, yeah, another Lily Orchard win. So she's got 2 so far. Good job, Lily. To an extent. Now, some works do incorporate bigotry into their world to criticize bigotry. If your world building has a component that is built-in bigotry, then yeah, by design, it's meant to be something to be criticized, something to be attacked, something to be a point of disagreement with your audience. You have to say that's bad, that's not good. Understandable if that's, something that you want to criticize. However, that being by that same metric, if you're supposed to just accept it, then that's not good. The Gore series, the Gore series?
I don't know.
It's basically planetary romance. Guy, stuffy English professor gets transported to a world of fantasy and adventure. A lot like John Carter, honestly, except with a lot more slavery, like tons of slavery and a massive dose of misogyny. It's awful. I genuinely do not like this series at all. I think it's insane that it has
Harry Potter kind of endorses slavery.
It's one of the worst pieces of crap I've ever read. That being said, The world building is also very bigoted. Like, again, it's a bigoted world where misogyny is the highest good, and that's not okay. That's built into the world building. That's the kind of thing Lily's criticizing here. But a counterexample would be something like Full Metal Alchemist, where you get bigotry that's in the world and you get actual genocide. And the story criticizes.
I thought this was a bad video, or do you still watch it? Wait, I never said this was a bad video.
The sanctioned cruelty and the trauma it deals both in the people who are attacked and the people dealing out the damage, and how, frankly, one of their senses of pain is more valid than the other person's pain. It deals with a very nuanced perspective on this matter that's complicated and difficult. The world building isn't bigoted. The world building is anti-bigotry because it shows bigotry for the damage it causes. So, again, it all depends. But this also goes into stuff like, let's say, apologizing for the Merchant of Venice's anti-Semitism, like what we discussed in my recent video. Again, with that, yeah, the bigotry is built in and needs to be called out. It needs to be criticized because it was written a certain way. And modern performances of Merchant of Venice often try to recontextualize the bigotry to be sympathetic to those experiencing bigotry.
Link your page.
People sometimes will go, well, the text is nuanced. The text isn't. No, well, the text is still bigoted. It's still showing this anti-Semitism. So you have to grapple with that, and that's difficult. It's not easy. Tip 11 and 12 are the exact same tips. I'm going to read it twice.
Okay.
Actually, next 3 tips are kind of the same.
Oh.
Tip 11, don't pair adults with minors. That's pedophilia. Don't pair adults with minors. That's pedophilia. Don't sexualize teenage characters. So these are all kind of the same idea. Don't eroticize younger characters. Yeah, okay, that's fair. I do think, though, something that's worth discussing is teens existing in a sexual world. That's a little more complicated. There was a lot of controversy when the movie Kids came out, for example, the 1990s film Kids, because it did show teenagers who were engaging in intercourse. A lot of it being very disturbing to watch and very
Okay. I'm gonna completely actually object
tip
to
11
this.
And
I'm gonna completely object to these points.
Or the exact same.
I'm gonna tell you why.
Read it twice. Actually, next 3 tips are kind of the same. Tip 11: don't pair adults with minors. That's pedophilia.
Okay.
Don't pair adults with minors. That's
10, 11.
pedophilia. Don't sexualize.
I don't agree with 10 and 11.
Teenage characters. So these are all kind of the same idea. Don't.
Okay, what if you want to tell a story about abuse, about children being abused by an adult? Here you go, already. This already kind of defeats the whole purpose of 10 and 11 in one fell swoop. You should be able to tell stories about this sort of abuse.
Don't eroticize younger characters. Yeah, okay, that's fair. I do think, though, something that's worth discussing is teens.
And it can involve pairing up, actually, an adult with a minor. Yeah, if you want to tell a story about abuse in a meaningful way.
Existing in a sexual world, that's a little more complicated. There was a lot of controversy when the movie Kids came out, for example, the 1990s film Kids, because it did show teenagers who were engaging in intercourse. A lot of it being very disturbing to watch and very unpleasant to watch, and a lot of it dealing with kids not knowing what they were doing.
Oh no, you shouldn't. How can you tell difficult stories about everything? It needs to be pink.
This is inappropriate by any standard of the word. Other critics were saying this is a really important message. It's showing the dangers of this lifestyle. So the story sometimes invites different interpretations based on the intentionality of the text.
I agree,
but pairing adults with minors, I think, is never something I personally want to see in any media. Again, an example comes to mind is Cardcaptor Sakura. The relationship between the teacher and the student, I personally find very distasteful. But I've also seen people who've experienced something like that in the past to find it, as in a weird kind of way, a cathartic way of addressing their own traumas. I can't speak to their experiences. It's their interpretation of text. I personally just find it very disgusting, personally.
Also, you can do that because Stephen King wouldn't do any books. If you're referring to it, that was just minors engaging in the group thing, not with adults. Lily has been known for copyright striking people. Jesus.
But again, I'm sure there's an argument for every trope. I just No, I personally, I get grossed out by that concept. So again, I'm with Lily halfway here. The only problem is, Lily, the reason why I don't say all the way with Lily is because your own writing has done this. You've paired adults with children. So again, yeah, good sentiment, Lily. Why don't you try exercising it yourself? Yes, you've paired.
What the fuck is this artwork? What? Oh my god. Oh, Jesus Christ. Also, again, what if you want to tell a story about abuse? Maybe?
Adults with children. So again, yeah, good sentiment, Lily. Why don't you try exercising it yourself? Or that Stockholm thing you wrote that I've never read and have no intention of reading.
It's about a strange person giving writing advice.
A fan fiction that Lily wrote that was also involved pairing adults with young. You know, on one hand, yeah, Lily, you're onto something there. Problem is, you're guilty of it. Again, I digress. 13. Don't make up weird anime excuses for sexualizing teenage characters. Actually, 1,000 years old. Fusion, age of consent in X country is ... See Rule 10. So the thing with Japan actually is very interesting because the age of consent is not 12 in terms of execution. Every province in Japan has a different age of consent, and the average lowest age of consent across Japan's many provinces is 16, same as it is in the United States, with some going as far as 18 and even 20. I think they've actually raised the national age of consent to match that level.
20.
So people who always say, well, the age of consent is actually 12 in Japan, they're wrong, because in execution, no province in Japan will allow you to have, so I digress. But yeah, no, there's a lot of weird anime out there that have some really strange stuff. I don't want to get into it too much because it's a whole video in and of itself, and I'd like to do a little more research before making any broad statements about the 1,000-year-old lolly dragon monsters. But again, it's something that I personally disagree with as well. I think that's kind of uncomfortable and I don't like it. That being said, Lily, again, it'd be a lot easier to listen to you say this if you didn't write Stockholm. Again, never read it, but I've been informed there's a lot of stuff in there that you would probably dislike with your writing advice. Just saying, Lily. Just saying. 14. Making a metaphor for gay/trans/ace rep is always inherently inferior to just making a gay/trans/ace character. Now, again, Lily, here's the problem with that. Allegories are good too. A lot of times with general audiences, they're gonna be a little put off by confronting them, which I think is ridiculous. I think they should be uncomfortable as much as possible. But certain stories do incorporate allegory as a means of express.
I don't know. I think allegories are fine, depending on the setting, the story, etc.
Untold feelings. A lot of authors, for example, will use shapeshifting as a means to express trans identity. Orlando, the incredible story by Virginia Woolf, uses a character who physically changes from male to female over the course of their lifetime. N.D. Stevenson's Nimona has a similar idea that I think the film adaptation kind of makes more textual than subtextual.
I don't know. I personally kind of like the use of metaphor.
And are a great allegory for any abused minority. And you can really kind of transplant your own experiences onto it. Of course, with the X-Men, several X-Men are also not straight. Very famously, Iceman came out as gay, but there are others. Kitty Pryde, for example, is bisexual and has been for years. People who are shocked by that have not been reading comics between Kitty Pryde and Magic in the 90s, like Excalibur, and I can tell. So, just saying. Kitty Pryde, bisexual icon. But again, the point is there is an allegory, but there's also text. There's also something more overt to go with.
Yeah.
And both of those are important components, and you gotta look at both of those fairly. 15. If they are humans in your story, restricting gay/trans/ace rep to the non-human characters makes you a huge turd. Okay, again, here's the problem. Restricting. Weird terminology. There are also reasons why characters aren't overtly queer in a film. Again, it's not just the creator. I think Lily here works with the assumption that the creator has the final say in all regards, that creator's rights trumps everything else. But that's not really true, is it, Lily? The reality is simply this. A lot of creators are restricted by studios. They're restricted by sets of restrictions, maybe in some cases personal violence. Becky Albatari, who wrote Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda, was closeted for many years, even while writing works explicitly about queer characters, because she wasn't ready herself to come out yet. And there's some communities where people are writing works for a community and they can't physically write the character as overtly queer. And so they find workarounds to incorporate LGBTQA themes into a work where they wouldn't otherwise be able to. So again, this is a matter of perspective, and I think the problem is Lily is looking at it from a very specific author ownership perspective and not necessarily from, hey, the creator of a work wanted to make something and the studio pressured them not to. A great example, again, would be Steven Universe, but Lily kind of believes that Rebecca Sugar is responsible for all elements of that show, and not the studio heads of Cartoon Network pressuring.
I cannot properly comment. The only thing I want to watch on Netflix right now is that movie Transformers 1.
Her into not making characters who were more overtly queer.
Someone calls Sugar a fascist because of what they saw in Steven Universe, then that is a rod she created for her own damn back.
16. If the only gay man in your story works as a foppish diva, you're a huge turd.
What is that? What?
I think that's highly restrictive, actually. If you're... Let gays be divas if they want. And if there's only a couple characters in the story, you know, again, it all depends on the execution.
Well, okay.
I think relying on stereotypes is a little problematic, if not very problematic. But again, it depends on the works. Some works, like Trauma, for example, want to rely on stereotypes to be deliberately offensive. But by being so deliberately offensive, they actually don't offend anyone. Because you watch a Trauma movie knowing it's going to offend you. And that's part of the fun. There are characters, for example, in The Toxic Avenger, who are foppish divas. Made in the 80s, of course, so different time. But the whole story is meant to be a hyper-exaggeration of reality. And as such, it's meant to challenge your sensibilities. So, again, some works do deliberately rely on stereotypes to be offensive. Other works, though, unintentionally do it. And again, I'm not defending works that only show the foppish diva as the only gay character, because that's that is a stereotype, and it's uncomfortable. Especially if you have the sassy gay friend character who only exists as the sassy gay friend, with no discernible character.
Are we talking about what's the...
I think the more telling matter is...
Are we talking about Invincible? Was Invincible just a gay character that's like a...
arc of their own and conflicts of their own? That to me is more important than if they embody a stereotype or stereotypical trait. 17. If the only lesbian in your work is an abusive rageaholic with vague angst issues and a codependent relationship to a protagonist, you're a huge turd. That feels like a direct reference to She-Ra again.
That is a very
Lily,
specific. That sounds
Catra.
very specific.
If all you're upset about is Catra, just talk about Catra, okay? 18. If your only non-binary character is a non-human shapeshifter, you're a huge turd.
Oh my god, is this still She-Ra? Yeah, that's She-Ra. I know about the shape-shifting character. Was a pretty cool character, by the way.
Trouble. You're just talking about She-Ra. I wonder how Lily feels about Morph from the most recent X-Men cartoon, X-Men 97. I wonder if she'd count a mutant as non-human. Probably. She probably would. What am I talking about? All right, 19. If your only autistic character is an ethically challenged number fetishist, you're a huge in Traptra? You're just talking about She-Ra, Lily.
Could this be my biggest step yet towards making ancient and modern technology truly compatible?
Oh, these writing tips are just referencing She-Ra. And again, She-Ra tries to have every demographic represented at some point in time.
I cannot even think of examples of that trope of masculine lesbian acting tough just for the sake of it. I cannot think of examples right now.
You can make an argument it's not always perfect representation, but hey, they got everyone in there. That's something. I'm noticing right now she's not mentioning Fat Rep, which is interesting. She's referencing other things. What? I digress. 20. If your only black character is a volatile, hyper-angry brute, you're a huge turd. Well then, I guess this is not about She-Ra, because Bo is an angel and just a sweet, sweet good boy, by all accounts. I love Bo in that show. Anyway, that's bad. That's not good. Yeah, I'm with her.
Barrett.
21. If the only black woman in your cast barely gets any screen time except to be fetishized or fits Rule 20, you're a huge turd. Yeah, that's fair also. That's 2 in a row I think I agree with Lily on. Well, racist stereotypes are a little different than queer stereotypes. And again, hers aren't even queer stereotypes. These are actually racist stereotypes cemented in decades and decades of racist bigotry and ideology. That's
are those rules so fucking specific? Is because this person hates a specific show, so makes writing rules about hating a specific show. I don't know. I've said it some time ago, but when I think of writing tips, I don't think, hey, don't pair up X or Y in your story in the third act. I think, hey, if you have a writing block, try writing as many ideas down as possible and then going through them and kind of organizing them. Or decide if you want to build your story around characters or around the world that they inhabit. Or, stuff like that. That sounds like actual advice for writing, not whatever the hell this is.
Racism. So the thought that comes to mind first is frickin' Birth of a Nation, where they use that same stereotype as a means of communicating basically white supremacist ideology. Yeah, so Lily, those are 2 wins in a row for you. I'll grant you that.
You should.
22. If the only...
There you go. Then I give you great writing advice. Write all of your ideas down as soon as you get them. I know it sounds like a very silly advice, like, oh yeah, duh. But sometimes we think, yeah, I'll remember it. And then you just don't. Like, you just write everything down that comes to your mind immediately as it gets into your mind. And you'll have it written down. And if you forget it, then you'll just see it. Like, many times you have a good idea and you think to yourself, I'll remember it. It's such a good idea. I'll definitely not forget it. And then you forget it.
Women in your cast is a drag queen. It should be typo there, no big deal. In all but name, you're a huge turd.
Depends on what you want to do with your story. This one, I don't agree. I don't agree with this one. Depends on what you want to do with your story.
So drag queens.
No, I don't agree with this one. I actually don't agree with this one.
Okay, so the drag queen culture has had a bit of a transphobia issue over the years. Trans women were often pushed out of drag queen circles. So this is a strange thing to bring up. If you know anything about drag culture, basically, trans women have been fighting to be considered drag queens for quite some time. A drag queen is not transgendered. I don't get what Lily's doing by conflating these two. I feel like she's trying to say something a little different. Like,
I have an interesting question.
I
will answer
trans
it.
Character is dressing up as a woman, but not identifying.
What's the name of the video? Lily Orchard does not understand writing. That's the title. Lily Orchard does not understand writing. Okay, shoot me with your interesting question. And I will do my best to give you an interesting answer, if I can. What do you find to be the best representation of trans people in culture? Good trans representation in culture. Me. I am the best representation of trans people in culture. Hold on, I'm gonna give a real answer. I have to think. Is there actually a good representation of trans people in culture? I'm actually struggling to think of a good representation of trans people in culture. God, I'm actually struggling right now to think of something that's... I don't know. I have to think about it. I actually don't know. I cannot think of any. Sad. I just cannot think of any good representation in the media of trans people. I cannot think of any. I genuinely cannot think of any at the moment. I could have sworn there was something. I had maybe in some video game, maybe there could have been something good. Oh yeah, there is. Yeah, you know what? There is one example of pretty good representation of trans people in culture. Kiko, was it Kiko? Yeah, Kiko from One Piece is a good representation of trans people in the media. There you go. It was done very seamlessly and not in your face. Like that was the whole thing was addressed once. Oh, aren't you a guy or something, whatever? And she says, I'm a woman inside, something like that. It's Kiko from One Piece is a good representation of trans people in the media. I would say I like how that character was handled. There is a one president trans person. Oh yeah, I can show you. There we go. Here's the character in One Piece that's trans. So yeah, One Piece has good representation, I'd say.
As a woman, if that makes sense.
What's the time on the video? 35 minutes.
Again, I'm thinking of something like, say, Norman Bates in Psycho, or Dressed to Kill, which is Dressed to Kill is terrible. I think that's a movie that is really
Elliot
bad.
Page?
Or, let's say...
Maybe.
Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, that whole twist ending.
Oh,
where the villain
God.
is just a man dressed as a woman to hide themselves, which is awful. Or in the case of Psycho, the whole wanting to become his mother thing. Another example might be Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs.
There's no correlation in the literature between transsexualism and violence. Transsexuals are very passive.
Clever girl. Billy is not a real transsexual, but he thinks he is. He tries to be.
Those are examples of problematic media.
What the fuck does that mean? Not a real transsexual. He wants to be, he thinks he is. That's just what? A trans character. A trans character, I think.
Media, and we've discussed that in other videos here. But that's not drag. That's a different concept. So I'm wondering if Lily's actually trying to reference one of those and just fumbled the ball a little bit. Which is possible. It's okay if you fumble a little bit. That's fine. It's going to be a long video, I think. Good thing I didn't do this on stream. We've been interrupted by super chats the whole time. Would have had to do like a 6-hour stream as opposed to a 2-hour video. Anyway, if you force a woman to kiss her abuser, you're a huge turd. Well, okay, so here's something interesting. So obviously...
Okay, what if you're writing a story about abuse? Again, you're going to end up forcing, quote unquote, or writing your character to kiss the abuser. Like, it all depends on the context in the story.
Works, as Lily has said, are the product of the creator. If you write a story about abuse where the abuse...
There you go. And I don't think it's a controversial statement to say that it's okay to be a writer and write about abuse.
Is pressured into kissing their abuser, that's disturbing by design. But, as we've mentioned before, Lily counts enemies to lovers as abuse. It counts the two women who are trying to fight each other across battle who end up kissing, that's counted as abuse to her. So again, the idea of forcing a character to kiss an abuser, well, it depends on the story you're telling. If you're trying to be upsetting, that's sometimes a good device to make a character uncomfortable, to show how awful the abuser is, and make it more satisfying when the hero can break away from that. But Lily counts a lot of things as abuse, so things that wouldn't ordinarily be counted as abuse. So you got to take that with a grain of salt from her, because she's not a reliable bearer of information. 24. If you sideline every non-white character in your cast to focus on a white boy with anger issues and a tendency towards hostility, getting a redemption arc, you're a huge turd.
That feels very specific. That feels like the person's talking about a specific story.
Gotta be a specific character that Lily's thinking of, but I can't think of what she's talking about specifically here. Yeah, if you sideline all the people of color in your work for one character's journey, that could be considered bad, but it could also be that only one character really matters to the conflict of the story. Character versus self as a core conflict. The problem here is what counts as sidelining. Not every character should be given equal attention in the narrative. Sometimes a character has to be more specifically focused upon. It's a bit confusing because I need an example that you're referring to.
Yeah.
Because what do you count as sidelining? What do you count as a white boy with anger issues? What does that entail?
Yeah,
Without
I have
specific
no clue.
examples, I'm having a hard time really figuring out what you're referring to. Because you could consider Darth Vader as that, as his redemption arc throughout Star Wars. You could consider Shinji Ikari. Well, he's not white. None of the characters in Evangelion are white. They're all Japanese, except for, Asuka's white, Asuka's German, and she's oddly enough the character who's deliberately sidelined later on in the story.
Actually,
and that's
Asuka's half German, not German. So she's half Japanese, I believe.
plot point, but I digress. That's a case where a character with a real emotional problem is centered, and there are other characters who are sidelined a bit. Oddly enough, in Evangelion, the white character is sidelined, which is kind of funny in this context. I love Asuka. She's a great character. And that's another thing, too. In terms of the sexualization question before, going back to that, Evangelion uses the voyeuristic camera to make you uncomfortable and to show how certain characters are revealed in very intimate moments. And as such, you get a sense that you're looking at something you shouldn't be looking at. It's a camera designed to make you uncomfortable, which is made all the more disturbing, I think, in one of Evangelion's most disturbing scenes, where you're cutting to Asuka leaving the shower. It's around episode 23 or so, 22. And she has a mental breakdown. It's genuinely, to this day, I find it to be one of the most disturbing scenes in that show, because it's such a real, authentic...
It is very different. It has very different approach to the character, the protagonist, because it is very different. The manga and the anime started off at the same point, but the manga was finished a lot later, and it actually changed a lot of the story, and the attitude towards the characters themselves were very different. Shinji in the anime is more sad, and this is very interesting because it affects how the scenes actually play out. In the anime, Shinji is sad, reserved, and in the manga, Shinji is angry, an angry guy. And it just sort of creates different outcomes. And also manga explains the whole lore. The manga actually does explain what the deal with the angels is, what the deal with the first and second impact is, what it all means, and why. It does not leave it vague. It just explains it. And what everybody wants to accomplish in this story. What else? And also, there is a scene near the end of the anime where Misato kisses Shinji to push him to save Asuka from those angels. Or was it fake Evas? And they massacre her because Shinji goes out too late to help her. And then Shinji has a breakdown because he is too afraid to go out to her in time. But in the manga, he actually goes out there and saves her. And that is a huge difference in the story. In the manga, he just goes out there and rescues her before she is being massacred by those artificial Avas and stuff. There's a lot of differences. The ending is different in the manga. In the manga, Shinji chooses to believe in humanity and resets the world. And there's a very optimistic ending to the manga where Shinji lives in the new world and tells himself that life might be tough, but he will walk forward on his 2 feet and step by step navigate through life. It's different. There's a lot of differences between the two, but it's worth reading. I don't know, because you're never gonna read it.
Emotional breakdown, and she's just screaming and crying, and it's like genuinely unpleasant. And earlier in the show, they'd cut to those scenes and be like a jokey joke kind of scene, and you think, oh, okay, you're kind of expecting something like that, and it's just so unpleasant and so disturbing, and it plays.
Also, there's no masturbation scene in the manga.
Expectations with anime tropes in a way that really makes you uncomfortable and takes you off guard.
The infamous one.
So again, certain storytellers know how to incorporate these elements in a way that actually adds to the story rather than takes away from it. Justifying horny armor designs or horny clothing designs with sexual agency makes you a huge turd. Characters don't have sexual agency. You make them that way as a justification. See Rule 10. But also, Rule 26, we're going to read it along with it. Related to the above, if your justification is to be honest and say you like oogling sexy characters, you're still a huge turd, but slightly less of a turd than above, slightly. If you're writing a work that's erotic and meant to be fun and cheesy, that's part of the intentionality of the text. I think boob armor and stuff like that is impractical. I wouldn't make it a moral criticism. I'd say this is really dumb because you can just stab the organs. It's not helpful. But again, arguing that a work that's tongue-in-cheek.
What about that character from Metal Gear Solid?
Is bad is
Phantom
really
Pain.
Wrong. There's always a need
that game
for
becomes more
stories
powerful the more
that
naked she is.
Sexual in some way, and to say that you're awful if you incorporate something that's goofy, even as a gag, it's like I don't know. I don't agree with Lily on that one. That one's gonna be a hard miss for me. I think that with all these cases, again, it's a case by case by case basis.
Sorry! You deviant! Why do all boys have to be such a bunch of perverted jerks? Perverse Idioten!
27. Don't worry about having everything planned out beforehand. No writer or creator plans everything beforehand, and the ones who say they do are filthy liars. Writers have, at best, 1 to 2 story beats they're determined to include. Everything else is by the seat of their pants. Maybe that's the case for you, Lily. That's not the case for everyone. Some writers are pantsers. They write by the seat of their pants. Some are planners. They plan everything out meticulously ahead of time before writing.
True.
This is why some novels can sometimes take upwards towards several years to draft, because they're so busy planning everything out before they even put a single pen to paper. Granted, I am not one of either of those two. I'm somewhere in the middle. I tend to outline a story beforehand before I start writing, and I go from there. But the idea that all writers do one methodology is so reductive, it's almost not even worth humoring. Very famously, we do have the notes of various writers. For example, Tolkien meticulously planned everything out with his work. Even though he would go back and revise a few things. Again, The Hobbit's a good example with this, with Gollum's challenge. Supposedly, Robert Jordan kept such meticulous notes that Brandon Sanderson had a very easy time finishing the Wheel of Time series after Jordan passed on. There's a lot of that. You know, different writers have different methods. That's just what it is. So it's not worth even humoring that point. Maybe you're a pantser. You plan by the seat of your pants, and that's cool for you if that works. So don't assume you know how anyone else writes, because you're probably wrong. Especially making general statements about how all writers do one thing. It's just not true. All right, 28. Don't try and quote-unquote do what Avatar did.
What?
I assume...
what the hell does that mean? Don't try to do... What Avatar did. Yeah, I know. You plan a lot especially around the characters. That was such a weird advice.
The cartoon The Last Airbender and not the blue people. You can't. Even the people who made Avatar can't make another show do what Avatar did. Well, my question is this. What are you talking about? Do what Avatar did. What does it refer to?
The truth of the matter is that for years, millennials wanted to find the next Avatar and kept looking in the wrong places for it. They looked for another adventure across a fantasy world where they should have been looking for well-rounded characters. They looked for villain redemptions where they should have been looking for good protagonists.
It's such a general, vague statement.
Yeah, exactly. It's meaningless. And also, it's not perfectly clear what she means because Avatar did not just do a one thing.
Meaninglessness. Do you mean make a meticulously planned out fantasy series? Do you mean have world building the way it is? Like, what you're saying is so vague, it's kind of pointless even discussing it. You're not saying anything. So let's just disregard that entirely, because do what Avatar did. You gotta be more specific.
There you go.
I get it's a tweet, but like, that's just not a particularly strong statement to make. So screw it. That being said, you should never make a work that's going to be the next this. Like, you gotta use your inspiration, use your sources of inspiration to encourage you onward, to figure out what worked in one story, what doesn't work in the other story, but don't act like you're going to make the next version of this. Make the next version of what you're going to make. Be original, but also use your sources well. See what works, take lessons from each work. You know, that's just how it is.
Or 29. Just use AI.
Low stakes, interpersonal conflict will always be more satisfying in the long run than high stakes saving the world. Friends is more popular than your favorite anime for a reason.
You're thinking in Japanese, aren't you? If you must think, do it in German.
Well, I'll try. Strudel, bratwurst.
What are you talking about, Lily? Like, Friends is not that popular, especially nowadays. You take a look at shows from the 90s. Friends depletes over time. Not as well liked as it was in its heyday. Dragon Ball Z, still beloved. That's as high stakes as you can get.
I do hate
Sailor
AI.
Moon, same thing.
Call of Duty being written by AI is so depressing.
By the way. But if you're going to use anime as an example, Azumanga Daioh, great series, I love it. Low stakes. Not as popular as Dragon Ball Z. Most sitcoms have a very short shelf life because they're so interchangeable. The ones that survive do something exceptional with their character writing. It's not the stakes that matter, it's the character writing. For example, Seinfeld is as iconic as it is, not because of the low stakes, but because the comedy's good. The characters are memorable. Low stakes doesn't matter. And let's also be frank, Friends doesn't exactly have the shelf life that Dragon Ball Z does, because humor is very subjective. It changes from decade to decade. What we find funny now is not what we found funny in the 90s. So if you write a comedy, don't expect it to be more popular today. Also, Lily, you wrote this when? What year did you write this? I think it was the 2000s,
everything
2020s.
personally.
Like, no one cared about Friends in 2020. All right? It's just
true.
not a thing that anyone cared about. So
that's true.
Why even make that statement? It's dumb. I never liked Friends because it's not a good show.
I had to remember it.
The characters suck. Quite frankly.
Damn.
Anyway, that's really the one sitcom you can come up with. Friends, not like Seinfeld, not even like Taxi Driver with. Anyway,
I hardly remember Friends.
All in the Family.
I'm not sure
I know you've watched All in the Family. That has a better, that's aged better than Friends has.
I did watch All in the Family.
Everybody Loves Raymond would have even been a better choice. Modern Family, Full House. You know, there's other ones.
I do like
Prince of Bel-Air, of course.
I do
They
like
had some high stakes
Modern
too
Family.
sometimes for the characters.
It has the Al Bundy.
The difference isn't low
actor.
stakes, high stakes. The difference is what people can watch and digest. But that doesn't mean it's meaningful art. It just means it's digestible art, which is not the same thing. A story, low stakes, high stakes, that doesn't matter. What matters is the story you tell around those stakes with the characters. Okay. 30. Choose whether you're a comedy or a drama at the start and stick to it. Don't make a comedy and turn it into a drama later on. That just annoys people. No.
Dragon Ball. Hello. Dragon Ball started as a gag manga and then became a fight manga. Whatever. Stories do that all the time. Stories switch gears all the time as time goes on.
No, you're fucking wrong. That's just wrong. That's the only time I've been annoyed so far. That's just wrong. A great example of this would be what they call Cerebus. So Cerebus the Aardvark was a comic made back in the 80s, I want to say, 300 issues long. It was the creator lost his mind.
Dragon Ball is a good example here.
But the idea of Cerebus is that when it started, it was a parody, it was a pastiche and parody of Swords and Sorcery with animal mascots. Over time, it became a very serious drama, and that helped it actually over time become stronger as a work. Its development over time became part of the story's legend.
Like Parker says, it should be known that Transformers 1 had both interpersonal stakes and overthrew the King plot, and then both made the story amazing. I want to watch Transformers 1. It's on Netflix, right?
And a lot of stories that start off as comedies do become more dramatic as time goes on, or stories that are dramas become more comedic over time. It sometimes does not work. A great example of this would be the Alien saga. Alien is a great horror film. Aliens is a great science fiction action film. Alien 3, I think, is still pretty decent, but Alien Resurrection tried to go full Joss Whedon comedy because they got Joss Whedon to write the script. And it's not very good. It does not fit tonally with everything that came before it. However, something like Madoka, which is an anime, which starts off in its first 3 episodes as a kind of slightly comedic, slightly lighthearted magical series before delving into horror, uses this blend well because the humor is to disarm you. It's to distract you from the obvious terror and disturbing qualities playing in front of you. Madoka, as a deconstruction of the magical girl genre, uses the horror elements later on to tell almost like a reimagining of the Faust storyline. Very deliberately, considering they have lines from Faust all over the scenery. The disarming humor is meant to make you vulnerable, so when the horror comes in, it's more effective. And a great example of combining horror and comedy is Scream. Scream is one of those movies that is from start to finish perfection. The original Scream is great, and from there it bounces between humor and horror, but it still maintains that same focus. Horror and humor are ultimately very similar. Another great example, Evil Dead. Evil Dead, the original, is a horror movie. Straight up. Evil Dead 2 is a horror comedy. Army of Darkness is an adventure comedy. And then the Evil Dead the Fede Alvarez one, it's horror again. It goes back and forth, and it works because what you're saying doesn't actually mean anything, Lily. A story can go from drama to comedy. It can go from comedy to drama. And it can do so very well so long as it's written properly. That's what it comes down to. You're wrong on that.
Yeah,
one.
it's very wrong.
I am very confident that you're wrong. Because it's worked so many times. It might annoy you. That's your preference. It's not mine.
Good. Bad. I'm the guy with the gun.
31. World building is like salt. A pinch can make it better. 10 cups of it will not. You are also wrong about that, Lily.
Yeah.
Again, you are so wrong about that. World building is essential if you're writing any story that takes place in a world that needs to be constructed.
This actually goes to your choice at the very beginning when you sit down to write a story. If you choose to focus it on the characters or if you focus on the world. That is like a big thing. You can have world that is not super fleshed out and then not a lot of world building, but you focus on the character. But you can have extensive world building. Almost the world becomes the character.
Fantasy worlds especially, Lord of the Rings would not work without world building. If you only had a little bit of world building like you want, you would completely lose the point of Lord of the Rings. And I know that you're bad with this because you ignore the world building of the Pokemon games. You ignore all that because you want to wander around a cave endlessly. Watch my response to a Pokemon retrospective for more details on that.
Oh no.
Point is, Lily, that you are And again, world building, what does that even mean to you? Because world building means any system of rules need to be established for the story to take place. Establishing locations.
Hello, what SLOP is that? It's a person talking about how Lily Orchard does not understand writing. Also, welcome to the stream. Welcome. Thank you for being here as always. I'm trying to gather money for the trip.
Establishing connections, establishing the physicality of everything, the history of a world. Without those details, you miss something. Even horror films that take place in the modern day need world building. Even dark fantasy needs it. Science fiction definitely needs it. Even some comedies need it to establish a setting, a location. Again, there is such a thing as overly detailed world building that distracts from the story, and that's a flaw on a case-to-case basis. But like with all of your rules, to have them, or tips I should say, having them be a standard for all media is reductive. Some stories could stand to use less world building, undeniably so. I think that some certain components of Wheel of Time could have been a little condensed a little bit, I think. It always helps to enrich the story, but I think you could have condensed a few details here and there, maybe tighten things up. And again, that's what Brandon Sanderson did when he came in. He tightened things up a little bit. But that doesn't change the fact that the stories are still compelling and still important, with all the world building included. In fact, some stories could use more world building, like Star Wars, I would say. The Star Wars sequel trilogy suffers from a lack of world building, I would say. I generally think those are a little overhated, I feel. Star Wars fans get a little intense about criticizing Star Wars, but my big issue is that the sequels could use a little more world building, which the Disney Plus shows are trying to do to compensate for the lack of world building that J.J. Abrams failed to incorporate. Because J.J. Abrams is not strong when it comes to world building. He loves his mystery boxes. World building, not so much. 32. Characters should always come before anything else. I agree with that sentiment. To an extent.
I don't. Sometimes you make the world your character, as I've said. You focus on the world.
Kind of a Lily win. Some stories
I don't agree with that.
Are not character-centric, and that's okay. I don't necessarily like those stories all that much. I prefer characters I can become sympathetic with, I can be absorbed by, I can root for. But yeah, that's a fair one. I'll give Lily that one. 33. The protagonist should be a protagonist, not just a vessel for the antagonist to hog the story. If you're going to make a villain protagonist, just open with that. What do you mean by that, Lily? I need an example.
I love the world in Dune more than the characters. See? That's a good example.
Example of what you're referring to. Because some stories can have multiple POV characters, right? The protagonist doesn't have to be the only protagonist, and an antagonist can still be a centralized figure. A protagonist should be central, undeniably so, but what does that mean? Do we mean in terms of scene stealing? Do we mean in terms of time on screen, time on page? Viewpoints from that perspective? What are we referring to? A character like Jean Valjean in Les Miserables, there are entire 100-page segments where Jean Valjean does not appear at all. Yet he is known as the protagonist of Les Mis because he is the central focus of the story. Even when he's not on screen, he is still relevant because his actions have caused a domino effect with other people's lives, essentially. Except when it hasn't.
No co jest, Fajdusiu? Chodź. Chodź, Fajdo, chodź. No chodź. Chodź do mnie, Fajdo, chodź. Chodź tu. No chodź, no.
Because even when Fantine is introduced, she takes over the narrative for a bit. But even then, she's not central in some of her own scenes. It's from another character's perspective about Fantine, and that's compelling. Heck, Jean Valjean does not appear for the first 50 pages of Les Mis because they're focusing on the bishop who changes Jean Valjean's life when he pops in. Jean Valjean is introduced as a minor character and is reintroduced throughout the early 100, 200 pages of the text as the central figure. But he is not the central protagonist. And for another, some stories don't have a central protagonist. For example, using Victor Hugo again, Hunchback of Notre Dame, who's the protagonist of that story? Who is it? Of the novel, not the Disney film, the novel. Because it's not Quasimodo, I'll tell you that much. The protagonist is Notre Dame itself, the building. The building is the central viewpoint of everything. It gets the most attention. It gets the most focus on. The building, not a human being, because if you look at it from this perspective,
the world can be
the
a character
of Claude Frollo is a more relevant character to the initiative moments of the plot.
Yeah,
his actions spur on more than Quasimodo's do in the book. So is he the protagonist or is he the antagonist? I'd call him the antagonist, but the villain, quite frankly. But again, he is more central to the narrative than Quasimodo is, at least in the book. And don't get me started on Esmeralda, who in the book is relegated to a very small role considering everything. But again, this is because you don't know these stories. Who's the main character who's introduced first in Frankenstein? It's not Victor Frankenstein, it's a random sailor who finds Victor Frankenstein, and then Frankenstein tells his story to the sailor. So again, heck, even Dracula. Who's the central protagonist of that?
Even better, who is the protagonist of the manuscript found in Saragossa? A very famous Polish book that Conrad, as a cultured person, should know.
Pages, it's Jonathan Harker. But he's gone for 300 pages afterwards. Again, different story structures required multiple viewpoint characters. And so to say a protagonist should be a protagonist and not be overshown by the antagonist, you're kind of missing the mark there a little bit. 34. Actually, ironically, 34 is a response to this. Perspective shifts are a staple of storytelling.
Good memory. Yeah, but who's that? There's no central protagonist there, really. There's no real central protagonist in that one.
Having only one perspective isn't a stylistic choice, it's just crap. No, it's a stylistic choice. Some stories don't exist outside the perspective of one character. Simply put, not all stories require multiple viewpoint characters. In fact, sometimes a story is benefited by being stuck in one person's head. A great example of this would be the stories of Sherlock Holmes. They're all told from Watson's perspective, and because of that, the mystery unfolds a little bit more. Sherlock draws our attention to mystery details Watson would overlook at first, and because of that, we're able to see this impressive character through the eyes of someone who can communicate the intricacies of Sherlock's thought patterns to us, the audience. Another reason why it's good, a viewpoint character can sometimes be deliberately restrictive. In the case of a mystery, it's important not to know everything for most mysteries. And because of that, it works. And alternatively, in the case of Columbo, which is a great show you should watch,
Columbo.
The criminal's perspective is often what we are centralized on. Columbo becomes the antagonist to the murderer's protagonist.
This is Daniel Morris. That's the man that you saw on the road Monday afternoon. This other man is his brother, Dave.
He's a fake guy.
You can see the problem, sir.
And the mystery and the tension there becomes, we don't know how much Columbo knows and how much he doesn't know. That's an example right there. Sometimes viewpoint characters are important to isolate because you can't know everything. Great example also, Franz Kafka, The Metamorphosis. We're stuck inside the brain of a guy who transforms into a cockroach. And that strangeness is part of why that story is so successful. 35. If you're making a cartoon, hire writers. Don't just have your storyboarders write the story. That's not what they're there for. Artists draw, writers write. Artists cannot just take over for the writers on a whim.
That is very interesting considering that Disney animated movies were directly storyboarded without a script. Just saying.
All that to Marvel Comics. The Marvel method back in the day was that the artists would draw something and the writers would fill in the dialogue bubbles. That's why there's still so much debate on whether or not Stan Lee or Jack Kirby made some of these characters. Because Jack Kirby was just involved in the writing process as Stan Lee was. And Jack Kirby did all the artwork for most of them. Not Spider-Man, that was Steve Ditko. But the point still remains. How much of the narrative is shaped by the actions presented visually versus the dialogue spoken? Tricky topic. But again, that's also why Stan Lee wrote so many comics. Anyway, the point is that anyone with creative instinct can tell the narrative, even if only visually. You're talking about Steven Universe with this, I'm pretty sure.
It's very reminiscent of how fanfiction is written, going with literally every idea you come up with and no regard toward whether it actually fits in the story. Subverting tropes purely for the sake of subverting tropes, going with the idea that shocking twists and vague mysteries are good purely on principle and not taking execution into effect. Sugar writes like someone who has never written before or even taken a basic writing class. And that makes sense, because she's not a writer, she's an artist. And based on how Steven Universe is animated, she's a bad artist. Steven Universe's problem has always been, and will continue to be, its executive producer. You see, no animation budget, no writing staff, no adherence to a height chart, no tertiary thing that Tumblr thinks will magically fix Steven.
Like, that's what
Jesus, what?
Steven Universe very famously had a lot of storyboarders who helped incorporate narrative. But again, they were also the writers. They were the story people. Hire writers. If you can write and tell a narrative, you're writing, essentially. That's as far as I'm concerned. I don't know. I think Lily's being a little too reductive here. Even as a writer, I'd say that. If they're telling the story, they're the storytellers. 36. Related to Rule 2, will they, won't they, isn't a fun story. It's just addiction peddling. We need to stop pretending Ross Rachel was good storytelling and learn to appreciate Shander, Monica, and Joey Rachel.
That's not writing advice.
Is Friends your sole connection of how to write a romance story? Will they, won't they, is the core mechanic of Pride and Prejudice, which is a great narrative. If you can tell the story effectively, it's effective. If you can't, you can't. The reason why Friends' romance sucked was because Friends sucked. Yeah, controversial opinion. Friends, kind of a shitty rom-com, sitcom, whatever. I don't care. Friends sucked. Never was a fan of it. Never liked it. Yeah. I was more of a Seinfeld, everybody loves Raymond kind of guy. Friends, not so much. If you're using Friends as a descriptive of how to write a story, you're doing it wrong. Just saying. That's my writer tip for you, Lily. Yeah, so again, like all stories, it depends on execution. Sometimes, will they, won't they, does work. Other times, it doesn't. It's that simple.
There's a pub downstairs that serves hot meals. Maybe they have waffle.
What are waffles?
I can't wait to introduce you to my truest love.
37. Romance trope but gay is not an absolute rule to live by. If She-Ra taught us anything, it's that gay Rayla was not actually an improvement.
She-Ra?
So,
again?
What does that mean? What are you even saying? Are you saying that romance is bad? That romance tropes are bad? Which is possible. Some are bad. Some are bad. But these romance tropes apply to love stories. So what are you saying we need to do instead? Invent new romance tropes? Well, that's not possible because love is a universal concept, and as such, these tropes are going to be around forever. You can try writing the first example of a trope. You can give it a shot, but it's going to be tough. And it may not be relatable to human experience because most of these romance tropes are based on human dating experience.
Oops.
Like, what do you want us to write? What are you expecting people to write? Make up new concepts of interaction based on intimacy? The arbitrary ramblings of someone? I don't know. Make it this trope but gay is not... That's a useless statement. It's just make a romance trope. That's it. So 38. Someone on his hell site, this being Twitter, once made this remark. We need more lesbian non-con because purity is boring. This is a dangerous, violent person. Do not listen to them. They do not have a point. Seriously, my fucking God, what is wrong with you people? Non-con being, of course, in this case, non-consensual affection. I don't want to get involved in that one, Lily, because that's
giving
the accusations leveled against you. It's kind of tough thing to discuss without getting into those accusations I don't like talking about. So no, we're not going to discuss that, Lily, because that's weird. I'm not a fan of non-consensual romance in fiction or affection. I find it deeply uncomfortable. So for my personal preference, I would say I don't want to see that, but some stories are about assault. Some stories are about bad things happening to people.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it romantic. I'd say it's more like I Spit on Your Grave, where it's disturbing and meant to be unpleasant and not fun. But again, it depends on the story. I personally would never want to see it in my life. But, you know, if someone's working through something and that story is therapeutic to their trauma and their pain, I can see how someone would be drawn to that, but I personally find it repugnant, personally. So I'll agree with you on this, Lily, with the condition
I will not agree. Like, telling a story is not the same thing as endorsing a thing that the story tells.
I can see why someone might need a story like that, and by shaming them, you're actually attacking their trauma or whatever, but I don't like those stories, so I'm not going to defend that too much.
To avoid fainting, keep repeating. It's only a movie. Only a movie. Only a movie. Take as much as you can. Only a movie.
39. Women who fetishize abuse, Raylos, Catadoras, Kaigos, etc., and present it as something feminist and paint detractors as misogynists are gaslighting you. Don't listen to them. I don't care about shipping, so we're moving past that.
True.
I don't think there's anything... romanticizing abuse, I wouldn't say all of these are abusive. Like, Raylo is their enemies to lovers. That's not really abusive. They're enemies. And they don't hurt each other once in a relationship. It's that kind of danger component to it. The tension being the dramatic irony of them being on separate sides. The problem is, I know Katadora with Katra and Adora from She-Ra, they're also similarly on opposite ends of a war. They're not really abusive in romance as far as I recall. It's more that they are enemies that become lovers over time. That's not so much abusive, that's conflict. That means they're fighting a war. And Katra goes way too far with it, obviously. But the entire second half of She-Ra is her coming to terms with her awful actions and trying to be better, if that's even possible. So, again, I think you're conflating a few terms here, Lily, that I don't personally think make much sense. 40. If abuse fetishists are giving you shit for not caving to their demands, just block them. Don't argue with them. Don't debate them. Don't treat them with good
writing
faith.
advice?
Just block them and get on with your day. That's not even a piece of writing advice. That's
exactly. What the fuck?
That's just... I'm not even going to waste my time with that. 41. Okay, 41. Rape victims are not villains and should never be written as villains. Don't be like Blizzard Entertainment. It costs $0 to not be a misogynist pig. First
That's stupid.
Lily,
Victims can become perpetrators.
Why do you assume all rape victims are female? A lot of men get assaulted too. I'm not going to elaborate on that statement any further, but just know that they are people here who are male survivors of assault, and I won't get any further than that today. But that being said, Lily, and this is a very important statement, why can't they be villains?
Exactly.
Why can't a person be awful or fail to channel their trauma in a way that's healthy? Does that make someone bad? Is it bad writing for someone to...
Like, victims can become perpetrators, and they can perpetrate the cycle of abuse. That happens. That actually happens. So why should those stories not be told?
And be a bad person?
Exactly.
Surviving horrible incidences doesn't make you a morally just person. It just makes you traumatized.
Yep.
It's awful.
And trauma can lead to awful things. But that doesn't mean that people are forgiven for any bad things that they do, nor does it mean that fiction should make them into these sympathetic characters all the time. Some people are hardened by trauma and do bad things. That being said, sometimes assault as a backstory is used to justify the actions of a character who does awful things completely disconnected from that. A great example that would be from the anime Fushigi Yugi, the villain Nakago, who's the big bad of that series, does thousands of awful atrocities, but at the very end you realize that he was
assaulted by the emperor of his region, and that's meant to be his sad backstory at the end. That it just feels out of place. It doesn't really justify any of his actions, and it feels like a sloppy attempt to make this villain the author has admitted that they love more sympathetic. But I digress. Point is, you can have assault as a backstory for a character, and their villainy could be completely disconnected from being assaulted. The trick is this: how much of the assault justifies the atrocities, and how much of the assault leads into the actions that are taken. Again,
also, it's not just a question of how much it even it's not about justification, because you can the thing can still be completely unjustifiable, but it can become more understandable. You can understand more why the character became how they became, even if none of it is justifiable.
Depends. And a good writer can figure out a way to balance it out.
So,
by saying as a term or a rule
there's a difference
that
there.
Every instance of assault makes a character impossible to be a target of villainy or be a perpetrator of violence, that's not a fair statement. A lot of assaulters were themselves assaulted when they were younger. You know, that's just a fact. Not most, I should say, but enough were. You know, people continue cycles of violence and pain.
Yeah.
It's tragic, but stories
people perpetuate cycles of abuse,
a place where we can discuss and analyze that in a way that's safe. And some people just want to be villains or read about villains, and maybe they want to relate to them. Maybe they're survivors of assault too, and find wish fulfillment in the powerful villains they read about. Again, these are all justified reasons why someone would want to read a story about that. But again, it seems like your only frame of reference is just Blizzard, and since I don't care about WoW, you know, there you go. 42. If straight men really hate a certain character, but lesbians love them, there's a 90% chance that is your best character. Okay, you're right. That's fair. I can't argue with you on that one. Anyway, 43. If one of your writers believes Simon from Infinity Train was misunderstood and Grace is a villain, that writer should be fired immediately. Why?
Why should
he be fired?
I don't
get it.
They're
a good writer. Their taste in fiction shouldn't dictate if they can write a scene or not. Anyway, it's been ages since I've seen Infinity Train, so I forget the specifics of those characters. Was Simon the one who had all the numbers on him? Was that him? I don't remember. It's been ages.
Such a long video we're watching.
44. The best solution to a love triangle is polyamory.
No, it's not. Why? There's no one best solution to anything, I would say, in writing, so...
Sometimes. Not always. Again, it depends. Depends on the case. Not every case is going to end with that. I would be fine with a lot of love triangles becoming polyamory, but that's neither here nor there. Depends on the writer, depends on the story, depends on the characters. Not every character is poly. Some are not. So, you know, what are you going to do? A good example of this, actually, where it does end in polyamory, kind of, is Tenchi Muyo. So, you know, there you go. It's a good recommendation for you. 45.
Tenchi is a mess. It's not really polyamory.
If you have a male character who actually shows respect and admiration to a woman, and some of your viewers call that character a simp, there is a 90% chance you have a good character. Again, no argument there. Lily, another uncommon Lily win there. That's fine. 45. 46. Mary Sue is not a real criticism. It is thinly veiled misogyny. Always disregard it. Again, I agree. People who call things Mary Sue are usually just dismissing a character. The term is used so often it's borderline meaningless. So again,
that's true.
Lily, I'll grant you another win. 47.
I'll come back later.
Emotional vulnerability does not make a female character anti-feminist. Again, that's not wrong. It's just a neutral statement. Emotional vulnerability, that's kind of weird. So saying a character is vulnerable makes them not feminist.
Are you still reading that book on Polish social
range of emotions makes them more feminist?
I still do.
Fact. So again, Lily, you're doing good. Streak of 3, not bad. 3 in a row, they're pretty good. All right, Lily, there you go. There's your third streak. 48. Goblins are inherently anti-Semitic. Now, as far as I know, Lily, you're not Jewish.
What?
And I'm not Jewish either. So I can't speak really to what is anti-Semitic.
No, they're not.
But I can say this.
As a Polish Jewish person, no, they're not.
Have drawn from anti-Semitic stereotypes, right down to the pointy hats, the nose, to the ears, and all those.
Do you hear yourself? Let me show you this from it's the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. I just want to show you a caricature, and they're like, "Oh, look at that! That's from Harry Potter." And you're like, "No, that's a caricature of a Jew from an anti-Semitic piece
of stupid
literature." J.K. Rowling was like, "Can we get these guys to run our bank?"
Goblins have historically been used to be anti-Semitic. However, there are several Jewish writers who have used goblins to combat anti-Semitism. So, it depends. And other writers have tried divorcing goblins from the anti-Semitic stereotypes they've been associated with in the past. So, for example, rather than being greedy, gold-hoarding, big-nosed caricatures, Pathfinder has goblins be these kind of more like brownies a little bit from Irish folklore. More squat, more gremlin-like, and they love fire. Nothing anti-Semitic there. They've tried divorcing it from the tropes that people have criticized historically. So that's fair, but not always. Writers are becoming more aware now of the anti-Semitic roots for many goblins, and as such, they're trying their best to remove them from that. By saying they are always anti-Semitic, you're actually undermining the efforts of writers who are trying to deconstruct anti-Semitism from fantasy literature. So I'm going to have to disagree with you on this one, Lily. But with the caveat being, I get where you're coming from, but let's not discount Jewish writers who are trying to disentangle these stereotypes from fantasy creatures. 49. If your first thought when told about bigoted trope, bury your gays, goblins, etc., is to try and figure out a way to do it well, you are a huge turd who is missing the point. It's not that these tropes aren't done well, it's that they're done too much. So wait, hang on. First off...
What? Huh? Forget that you're a Jew!
Hang on a second. So goblins
You're
are
not
done
a real
So wait a
fan.
second, hang on. You just contradicted yourself. At first saying goblins are anti-Semitic, don't do them. Okay, I grant you that. Some goblins are very anti-Semitic. But then you say the problem isn't that they aren't done well, it's that they're done too much. So then your problem isn't that goblins are anti-Semitic. Your problem is that there's too many goblins. But that defeats your last point.
That's racist against goblins, isn't it? Too many goblins. They should be deported. They should be deported to Puerto Rico, and they cannot do any more anti-Semitic harm. I'm not gonna... I would do a joke, but I will not.
See, the problem with your rules, they're self-contradictory. So the idea that you're saying that the tropes...
I'd like a cinnamon roll.
Let's see this again. So...
Do it? Nah.
The problem is you're saying that the tropes are done too much. Okay. That's fair, but then why can't they be done
The
well?
joke is not woke.
You see? All tropes are done too much. All tropes are done all the time. The trick is not so much if they exist. The trick is if they're done well. There's one thing I can't stand about the TV tropesification of writing. We've boiled down writing into these tropes, these building blocks, and we ignore the fact that the tropes being done a lot isn't the problem. It's that they have to be incorporated well into a story. Any trope can be done well. It just has to be done well by a talented writer who understands the mechanics
Like me, I'm a talented writer.
By boiling down tropes into just simply good tropes, bad tropes, we reduce the complexities of writing. Because all tropes can be incorporated into a narrative, into a way that works. And sometimes the tropes can be tragic. Killing off a gay character, for example.
I wrote a cool comic book about a homeless dog that used to live under a bridge, and he would pee on his enemies and then return to the bridge, his home. And then he fought a wild dingo and died. But then he had a resurrection arc. There you go. I wrote it when I was 5 or 6. It has a barely able to draw kid art style. So maybe.
Isn't
possibly.
Do you count that as burying your gays? Having a gay character get killed off? What if it's part of their arc? What if their death is kind of the culmination of their moment? The problem is on TV tropes, anytime a gay character is killed off, the bury your gays trope is applied.
That's sick. I love it, right? I lost it somewhere, but yeah, it was a whole comic book. I had it in a binder.
So it becomes very monotonous. It becomes very flat because they ignore the complexities and specific context of each work. But if you type in Control F on a TV tropes page, you say, "Oh, bury your gays, that's bad," and you ignore the context which it happens in. You ignore what that trope did in context. That's the problem with tropes and catalogs like TV tropes. Even though I love the site, it boils these ideas and concepts down in a way where it oversimplifies them. You're losing information that could be really beneficial otherwise. And that's important to note whenever you're saying, "Oh, TV tropes, up, that's a bad trope. Oh, that's not good." No, think about it a little more. Be a little more creative about it. Understand that tropes are used in a way that enhances, enriches, develops a work, and understand when it's used poorly, because sometimes they are used poorly. 50, we're halfway through. We're after this one. Writing a relationship based on a dynamic or trying to get a particular...
I draw it a lot, had not been I don't know. I feel like you can teach yourself to draw. I feel like people get intimidated by the idea of drawing, but sometimes people are just placing one line in a different way away from the artwork looking not good to the artwork looking pretty decent. I say if you want to draw, then just draw. Don't worry about it.
Trope, enemies to lovers, into the story is a bad decision. Why?
What was the advice?
Or trying to get a particular trope, enemies to lovers, into the story is a bad decision. Why?
Depends on what you want to tell. Depends on the story you want to tell.
Dynamics are important. Dynamics are elements to characterization and character interaction. By having a good character dynamic, you create chemistry. Chemistry creates romance. Romance creates the reason people read romance. A good dynamic has character back and forth. By making characters too similar, that's not fun to read. The dynamic helps enhance the narrative. I do argue that a lot of romance writers are relying too heavily on tropes. That's not good. If your narrative is a stencil sketch...
Fair enough. Fair enough. We have limited amount of time.
And all you're really doing is just stenciling in new names to fit archetypes that already exist. That's poor writing. It's not thought out. You gotta be a little more creative, innovative. But at the same time, these are tropes people love. So how do you have a little flexibility with it? How do you innovate while also making something familiar? That's trickier and harder to do. That's why writing is a craft. Not everyone can do it. 51. Vitriol does not immediately render criticism invalid. If you tone police criticism, you will likely miss something important. What does that even mean?
I don't know.
What are you saying?
It feels like this person is very vitriolic and is trying to just thinly layered, "Hey, leave me alone. I'm vitriolic, okay? And you're gonna like it. It's gonna be your writing advice to let me be vitriolic if I like." I don't know. How is that even a piece of writing advice?
Hang on a second. Vitriol does not immediately render criticism invalid. If you tone police criticism, you will likely miss something important.
This has nothing to do with writing. This is not a piece of writing advice.
Well, it's funny coming from you, Lily, considering how often you tone police your critics.
Yeah, but this has nothing to do with writing.
But yeah, no. Someone being angry doesn't invalidate it. That's fair, but...
That's fair, but it has nothing to do with writing.
I wonder what happened to the person who wrote that, Lily. Because you tend to do it quite a bit. Dismissing critics based on minor issues with their presentation. Or, you know, who knows. 52. Your fandom will fight and argue. This is how people solve conflicts. It's typically better to let people fight it out than be complacent and beg people to just stop fighting.
So just abandon any and all moderation. This is stupid advice. And also, again, it has nothing to do with writing. This is supposed to be writing advice, but it's just... I don't know. This is stupid.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's fine.
That's no, it's not. No, it's not fine. It has nothing to do with writing. Nothing at all.
As someone who loves a good fight and an argument, that's fun. That's fine. I'm cool with that.
It's fun, but it's nothing to do with this is supposed to be right. Whatever.
And again, the fact that a fandom is fighting proves they're passionate about it. And that passion is important. I always argue that literary discussion is a conversation. It is a bigger...
Fine, but it depends on how this fighting is being conducted.
Statement to make. It's not simply, this is the only answer, here's how it's got to go. But sometimes you do have to step in as the creator. Sometimes they are conflicts that are a little too big, and people are getting doxxed, people are getting harassed. Then you got to step in. Try to cool the jets a little bit. Try to de-escalate things, if possible. 53. Related to the above...
That sounded so nice. For some reason, that sounded so narcissistic. I cannot even believe...
is valid should never leave your mouth. Do you want pedophiles and fascists in your fan base? Because that's how you get them in your fandom. No argument there. I'm of the mindset that you have to argue certain things. Let people have...
Okay, managing your fan base is not writing advice, okay? Stop planning how to handle your fan base if you have not even written anything. Like if you're in the spot when you need writing advice, okay, then one of these should not be how to handle your fan base. It should be how to write something that will get you the fan base to begin with. This is just silly to me.
Fun for the most part, but some things you do have to put your foot down. There's a rule in punk rock, for example, that any Nazis that show up to a punk club or whatever gotta get kicked out. Because you can't let them just sit there. You can't let them feel cozy. That's a fair statement, Lily. I'll give you that one.
I will not. It's nothing to. There's nothing to do with writing.
Those headcanons are pretty much innocent fun. Sometimes you gotta put your foot down somewhere, and that's important. Like the yeah. Anyway.
Okay.
54. Speaking out against abuse fetishists, pedos, and bigots in your fan base will always be better in the long run than being quiet or complacent. It might be exhausting to deal with, but it's better for everyone in the long run. Yeah, okay.
Okay, that's not writing again.
I agree with you on that one. That's fine. Another Lily win, let's put it up. That's fine. Yeah, I agree with you on that one. We should fight against people who are terrible and bigoted. No argument.
Okay, how will that make my writing better?
This has nothing to do with writing.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you for acknowledging it.
It's not writing tips. This is statements on fandom conduct, which is important, but again. 55. Fan service is a concept you should never think about. Fans who need to be serviced are not actually fans. If you have fans, those fans are already having fun and don't need to be pandered to. That's not... What? Do you know what fan service is? Fan service is a term that's used so widely it becomes meaningless. But anytime a fan is rewarded for their fandom...
I read a fictional book set in the PL Commonwealth. Many historians just write novels set in their special interest area, and it just goes smoothly as much as it can get. We have a very good novel written in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth era, actually. It's called, but the very famous author... God, what's the title of that book? I'm trying to remember. There's this famous Polish writer. Let me see. No, not the Deluge, not the Deluge. I'm talking about something more modern. It's about the Jewish prophet. There we go. I think. Księgi Jakubowe. There you go, that's the book. Olga Tokarczuk. Yep. That's the one. That's pretty good.
That could be fan service. Or, as in the case of Evangelion, it could be lots of other kinds of fan service. Though, I should note with Evangelion, that's meant to tease. There is no fan service in Evangelion. You're just going to get trauma instead. So, I digress. But again, that's a fair statement, I guess. But you should keep your audience in mind. You should reward them.
She's a decent writer. I don't know much about her as a person, to be honest. Why do you not like her as a person?
Or their loyalty, to their devotion.
Oh, there you go. This is the page in the manga when Shinji, your YouTuber, spoiled the manga for you. Sorry, Asuka, I'm late. What? You think he'll show up now to steal the show? See? He rescued her in the manga when he was too late in the anime.
And by doing so, and having in-jokes, having some fun with it, it means that it's a community, and the community should feel rewarded. When fan service overtakes a narrative, though, that's a little tricky. But sometimes fans need to be a little disappointed. Sometimes you need to go against what the fans want to make something that the fans need. Something rewarding, something powerful. And you give some space for the fan fiction writers to fix things up later on. But I digress.
Don't uncover them! I don't want those terrible memories anymore! Stop this, please! Stop it now!
56. The tendency for shipping to dominate discourse is the biggest sign that characters in their relationships are more satisfying than anything else. People didn't petition for a 4th season of Kim. Impossible to see what happened with Draken or to see new villains. What are you talking about?
This awakening. This cannot happen. This was the one time where I was like, why the lady hot?
Again, shipping discourse is major, and that's a big thing. I agree. People love shipping. People love that.
She's elitist and snobbish. Can you give examples? I honestly don't know. I'm trusting you on this. I'm trusting you. I'm trusting your judgment on this writer. Because I honestly don't know anything about her privately. I know I enjoyed some of her books, but I don't know much about her privately.
For some stories, not every story is about shipping. People aren't demanding for a new Friday the 13th film after 12 other Friday the 13th films because they want to see Jason shipped with someone. Certain fandoms love shipping, certain fandoms do not. If a fandom loves shipping, though, hey, play into it, pander it. But again, I digress. But again, weren't you saying that fans shouldn't be serviced? So what is it, Lily? Should fan service be a thing, or should fan service not be a thing?
Both.
Because shipping is basically fan service. Ship teasing is basically fan service. So what do you actually want? You feel like you're being very contradictory in this statement, and I don't think it makes a lot of sense. I don't think you thought these things through all the way. 57. Complaints about too much negativity is shooting the messenger. There is an overabundance of negativity. That means there's things to be negative about.
That's stupid. Okay? Even as a Polish person, I think this is stupid. Yeah, if there's negativity, then it just means it is what it is.
People cannot be positive about things to be positive about. Okay, people can't be positive without things to be positive about. Hang on. What the fuck are you saying with this?
Also, what does this have to do with writing again? I think I know what you're talking about. Didn't she say that she just doesn't want bigots to read her books? Wasn't that the context? I mean, that's her right, isn't it?
Complaints about too much negativity is shooting the messenger. If there's an overabundance of negativity, that means there are things to be negative about. People cannot be positive without things to be positive about. Lily, that doesn't make any fucking sense. Sure, yeah.
I'd have to look into it, but I'll trust you. I'll take your word for it. I'm not gonna deny that she's being elitist here, but I will probably look into it.
It's about things that are being made to be positive about, but even things that are good, people can still be negative about it. You know? Just because someone is miserable doesn't mean that there's nothing good going on. Yeah, some people are just overly negative, but
like me.
Who knows? Some fans suck. Let's be honest.
Thank you for being here. And less wonder. Wait, are you new to this stream? Or did YouTube change your name? If so, thank you. I hope I have gained a new viewer. Endless wonder. I'll check it out.
58. If you do something bigoted and get yelled at for it, listen to the people yelling at you. Cancel culture isn't real. The rage and vitriol will be gone in 2 weeks, and you'll be a better person for it. Getting yelled at stopped being the end of the world at age 10. You say that, but people can receive death threats online. That's a little harder to get over. For the most part, I agree.
Maybe I'll watch it, yeah.
But you got to think about it on a case-by-case basis. Some people do hold grudges, and a very long grudge, over fandom pettiness, or over miscommunication. And that's worth getting a little up against. And
so thank you
some
for
people
being here.
just say, hey, this is bigoted when it's not bigoted, because they don't have another word to describe what they're feeling, or their frustrations. They'll jump to, like, serious extremes, and not really articulate the specifics. And you should know, Lily, because people have called that about you. They've said you're bigoted. And you've reacted very negatively to that. Even when it's slightly true.
Uh-oh.
But I digress. Anyway, so. 59. The quickest and easiest way to make yelling stop is to own up to the mistake, don't make excuses, or explain why you did the bad thing, fix it, and never repeat it. Progressives are very forgiving if you give them results. Stubbornness is what gets people canceled. Again, Lily, you should know all this. And from personal experience, being online for a decade at this point, more than that, 2 decades, I can safely assure you this is not correct. Some people will never forgive you. And that's okay. You're not entitled to forgiveness. Even if all you did was make a mistake once or twice, people will still hover over that for years to come. That's fine, because the people who matter will let go of it, or move on, or understand if you said, hey, I screwed this up.
Really? Lemhader Tokarczuk? That's interesting. I guess I'll have to look into that as well.
But, by that same countermeasure, some people are just relentless and continually will chase after you for every small mistake you make, or every big mistake you make. And that's reality. That's just how the internet is. You have to accept that and move on with it.
That is so mean.
But that also said, you don't have to take it. If someone's throwing death threats at you for an error or misunderstanding or a response made before all the information came forward, you are allowed to be upset about that. And you should be upset about that. People discuss these things for a reason. But again, Lily, the problem is you're not the arbiter of this information because you are guilty of all this yourself. You do all of this. You do all of that yourself. So don't lecture anyone else about how to conduct themselves on the internet, all right? Because you're just as guilty. You're still complaining about people who insulted you years ago. You are one of the most sensitive people on this platform. Don't tell other people to hoisting up their brackets and keep going with life. No. Because you're just as guilty of the people you're criticizing. In fact,
I'm very sensitive.
You really are obsessed, aren't you?
60.
I am obsessed, and I'm also very delicate.
Forced diversity is a right-wing dog whistle and not a criticism. Agreed with that. Another Lily win. Put up on the board here. Yep. There's no such thing as forced diversity. It's just diversity. 61. Reclaimed slurs are not universal and as such should never be included in a work. No.
That's stupid. That's just stupid. What if you want to write about bigotry?
Oh, that's wrong. You are wrong for that. Reclaimed slurs, when written by someone who is reclaiming that slur, can use it. You can't talk about tone policing 1 second and police someone's tone the next. Your own rules are self-contradictory, Lily. You can't tell people, hey, anger and vitriol, don't shoot the messenger, they're important. But then tell someone, you can't reclaim a slur, never do this, you're wrong always. No, God no. You're just wrong. You're just wrong. Reclaimed slurs are an important component of deconstructing bigotry. And by reclaiming them, you are able to fight the instruments used to oppress people.
What if you write a book where slavery was still a thing? I think stories like that have been told.
So, don't tell people to accept the shackles back again. Do not tell people that they cannot reclaim the words used to attack them, especially if you yourself are not ever attacked by them. 62. Oppressed people fighting against their oppressors are not villains. No, I don't care if you think they went too far. Not all who respond with violence are wrong, and not all those who preach nonviolence are right to do so. Yeah, it's
okay, but
it's fair. But here's the problem with that.
Yeah, that depends on the story.
What if they're also just villains? What if they are not necessarily going too far, but doing something bad? You know, it's not black and white.
Don't you want realistic dialogue as he's supposed to talk with fake candy language? I mean, I agree. I agree with you. I agree that you should be able to put the actual language of bigotry in your stories about bigotry. Yeah, of course. I agree with that. So I think that's silly.
White like this. Sometimes people do bad things who are also opposing their oppressors. So should they never be villains ever? Even if they're doing something bad that's disconnected from their fight against their oppressors. Here's the tricky part, isn't it? That's where nuance comes in. That's where complicated stuff comes in. Most villains who will quote-unquote go too far aren't going too far. They're doing something else that's disconnected from their fight that is bad.
Well, there's also the question of how far do you go? If you think that all of the people are the evil oppressors, then do you think it's justifiable to murder their whole families, murder children? Just like when the Cossacks agitated the peasants who were abused in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and they agitated them against Jewish people. And they thought they were seeking justice, but they just massacred a bunch of people. Women, children, the elderly. So yeah, there you can absolutely tell stories that ask the question, how far is too far?
That's simply that. And sometimes people shouldn't be violent. And sometimes violence is the only solution to a dangerous, complicated problem. You know, very famously, there is the Martin Luther King line. A riot is the language of the unheard. It's a profound statement for a reason. Those who are unable to oppose oppression through language will often use it through the only language left available to them. That's worth discussing. But I think you're referring to stuff like, say, the X-Men with this, right? With Magneto. Well, I did a whole video on that. You can watch my thoughts on that yourself if you really want to know. But you won't, because I'm sure you stopped watching the moment I said you were wrong the first time. Okay, so 63. Related to the above, a good spin on heroes who never kill mantra is to highlight how refusing to kill a villain who later goes on to kill more innocent people makes the hero responsible for those deaths. There's a free story theme for you. Lily, that was done 20 years ago.
Yeah.
In Batman.
Yeah.
Under the Red Hood, one of those famous Batman stories of the modern era.
Yeah.
Ignoring what he's done in the past. Blindly, stupidly disregarding the entire graveyards he's filled. The thousands who have suffered. The friends he's crippled.
That was the point of that story. It's not new. It's not original. It's been done many times, actually. Many times by many writers in the past. And you would know this if you ever read anything outside of the limited amount of things you've apparently read. 64. If you're writing fantasy and you have no issue having dragons in your world, but suddenly think people of color are unrealistic because something medieval Europe, you're a huge turd and an idiot. Yep, okay, Lily's right about that. Another Lily win.
That's true.
Point also is that a lot of black people did exist in Europe. A lot of Asian people did exist in Europe. Middle Eastern people existed in Europe. That's just a historical fact. They were back in Rome. Sicily has a large black population because of sailors traveling across the Mediterranean. That's a simple history. People who claim that there is this historical bias against, black people always existed. Let's cut the bullshit. Agreed. So for Lily, you get a point, and I will defend that point very fiercely. 65. Sexual tension and chemistry are not the only indicators of a potential relationship, and in a relationship is the quickest thing to fade. Chemistry is quick to fade. Maybe sexual tension,
not quick,
and sexual chemistry, but that's
I will defend the phrasing here. The person did not say quick. They said quickest, and that's not the same as quick. Quickest is not the same as quick.
That's a very cynical way of looking at things. Obviously, romantic chemistry is very important as well, but sexual tension is just as important. Sexual chemistry is important. It's an important component of life in certain cases. Now, asexual couples, different story. That's entirely different. But even asexual people have aesthetic interest. They can like someone aesthetically for their beauty. And some asexual people can just enjoy having sex. Just the process can be fun for them. So I think you're doing a misservice to people by saying to discount it. It should be one of several components, however. Like any good piece of writing, human experience is multifaceted. You should look at an interaction or a connection with people through different lenses simultaneously.
Deviant! Why do all boys have to be such a bunch of perverted jerks?
66. The best potential romantic partner for a character is her best friend. After all, they're best friends for a reason. Now, of course, I feel this is discounting a lot of great potential romances out there. Again, I know you hate enemies to lovers and all that, but, it's there for a reason. It's a well-established romantic system for a reason. Again, it all depends on how it's written, depending on the romantic chemistry, what things they have in common. Like saying it's just their best friend, yeah, that could be interesting. That could be really good. I think Tifa and Cloud, for example, work better than, say, Aerith and Cloud. Though I think that Tifa and Aerith works even better, but I digress. And that's a case of best friends, But it all depends on the execution, I think. Though I do feel there's a reason why the vitriolic best friend combo is such a thing in shipping situations, because they do have that built-in chemistry, at least affectionate-wise, things in common. But again, it depends on the execution and the story. 67. I don't want X character to be defined by her relationships is a stupid philosophy to have. Everyone is defined by their relationships. That's how human beings work. Yeah, but you missed the point of that one, Lily. The idea when they say that, it's because they don't want them to be solely defined by their relationships, as in there are other components at play here. Codependency is not something that most people are aiming to be codependent. No. They want to have interests, ideas outside of their relationship to show them as a fully fleshed out character. I personally feel that most romantic characters should have a goal outside the relationship. So, using Pride and Prejudice for an example, Elizabeth Bennet wants to save her family by establishing a means through which they can make some money. Mr. Darcy wants to protect his sister and, kind of protect women from Mr. Wickham's insidious influences. So again, these are just some simple things outside of the romantic story that these characters are defined by and are compelled to do. Simple, not too complicated, but it's something that helps with stories to make them more fleshed out, to make them more interesting, to show that characters exist outside of just their relationship. The relationship can be a component of the character. It should not be the sole defining component, especially if the characters exist before the relationship is formed. They should have some character arc or goals or ideas flowing throughout the whole thing. Even in romantic comedies, such as movies like You Got Mail, you have a whole business side story that is kind of secondary to the romantic plot, but also more important than the romantic plot in many ways to each character's arc. That's a simple Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan love story. A nice rom-com your mom probably loves.
I only know him through the,
Oh, let me guess. Through the internet?
68. If you don't want a character to only be remembered for a romantic subplot, don't end the story on that subplot reaching its conclusion. Give it time to sink in and become the new normal for the viewer. The memorable moment will always be the last moment. That is not true, necessarily. Yes, it's the note that you linger on, but a story should end when the story ends. To keep a story going on longer than it needs to, you're going to just drag out the plot. Now, the thing is, Lily, you're talking about stories where the romantic ship is a subplot in narrative. So, like a She-Ra, like a Steven Universe, like a Final Fantasy, like a King, like most fantasy or sci-fi shows.
Final Fantasy VIII is mostly about the romance.
With the romance,
actually,
reaching its culmination, they usually end with the big conflict being resolved, and that usually allows for the romance to be permitted. Now, for example,
so I guess you don't like Final Fantasy VIII.
The last moment is not always the most memorable. For example, Aladdin. Very simple example there. The most memorable romantic scene in Aladdin is A Whole New World, the whole carpet ride through the skies and all that. The last scene of Aladdin is Aladdin and Jasmine on the carpet as well, but that's much less memorable than the flying carpet scene with A Whole New World. Another example, Beauty and the Beast. Beauty and the Beast, the most memorable scene is the ballroom scene, which takes place before the third act. And they do get together, technically, around the middle point. But they don't confess their love until the end. And that transformation is less memorable than the ballroom dance scene. And these are all simple examples of very well-known romance movies that you definitely have seen because you mainly watch stuff aimed for the age group of 11 and under. That you would have heard of that counteracts your rule. 69. Slow burn does not mean taking forever to get together.
That's true, Conrad.
It means full series long romantic subplot. Getting together is the start of a romantic subplot, not the end. No, it's not, actually. Slow burn just means the progress takes a while. It means that the romance is spread throughout the series. A slow burn romance tends to have a kicking off point, build up, a culmination. And while it might linger past that point, it is the build up to that culmination that people refer to as the slow burn. It is not simply just getting to that point and lingering there. That's just being in a couple. It's not a slow burn romance. That's a burning romance. That is an on fire romance. Not quite the same thing. '70. Sexual awakening is not a real character arc. You are wrong. It is.
Yes, it is.
It can be a character arc. In fact, in some stories, it is. For example, But I'm a Cheerleader. That whole movie is about sexual repression, and the arc is getting to the point where they can admit to themselves that they are in fact a lesbian.
Everyone reads Cosmo.
I guess.
Everyone looks at other girls all the time.
But you only assume
Sailor
that
Moon
they're
had a
thinking
lot
what
of
you're
filler.
thinking when they look. Hello, Zuko here.
That is the point of the film. Another example, I know Lily loves this example, Rocky Horror Picture Show. The whole movie is about trying to get past inhibitions and be what you want rather than simply dream about being what you want. It's about letting go of what society expects and doing what you feel is best for you. And granted, there are a lot of problems with the Rocky Horror Picture Show. It's not aged flawlessly, but those arcs are still very powerful given that we are still dealing with repression to this day. Sexual awakening can be a part of a character arc, especially in coming-of-age stories featuring characters who are only coming to understand how they may or may not fit into society's expectations for them. That includes romantic interests as well. Great case in point for that would be works like Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda, which is a YA book about a teen who is closeted and coming to terms with his sexual interests, being gay. That is a component of the character that is completely an arc, and, you know, it works for the story. 71. The only people who think boob armor makes sense are people who have never touched a boob. That's not true. I mean, you can never touch a boob and understand how organs work. You know, leaving your torso exposed without bone or protection there could result in some organs being pierced. Just how it is. Boob armor is dumb. Very few people actually believe it makes sense, and I'm concerned for those who think it does, unironically. Though you can ironically say, no, it totally makes sense. Outside of something like, say, a magical situation where, like, the armor, like, inhibits their powers. Like, I know there's, like, there's some tongue-in-cheek fan comics that poke fun at this idea, but it's a silly idea. No one takes boob armor seriously. If you do, then I think you're reacting to the wrong thing.
Or like in solo leveling, when the armor is
72.
just invisible. You can make it
The
invisible.
bow and arrow are strength weapons, not dexterity weapons. Female characters who do archery should naturally be very physically strong. Long bows have a draw weight of 80 to 150 pounds. Rangers are always stronger than warriors. Deal with it. I don't think you understand why they're dex weapons. It's because of the aiming mechanics. You have to aim a bow. You have to be able to maneuver it properly. Yes, draw strength is a factor for a longbow, but that's not really a whole lot of strength. Like, lifting 150 pounds is not particularly a great feat of strength. It really isn't. And you can be trained. You have to develop strength to pull it, sure, and to hold it.
God.
But the aim and dexterity
That's
is far
not
more
writing
important.
advice. That's not
Lily
nerdy
has
nitpicking.
never used a bow and arrow before. I have. Granted, I'm not good at archery, but I can still aim a bow. The problem is Lily has no experience with weapons and is thus acting like she does know what she's talking about. This is why a lot of weapons, even including swords as well, use dexterity as well.
Yeah, I know.
Use aim.
That's
use
a good
precision,
question. I
use
don't.
Grace.
I don't
The
care
rapier,
about
for
stuff like
example,
that.
is not a
That's
strength-based weapon. In fact, most swords weigh about 2 pounds at most, even the big ones, because any bigger than that, it would be a very difficult thing to wield and
This
to
is just
swing.
nerdy stuff that I really don't care about, and it has nothing to do with writing per se.
Strength is less important than technique. Yes, you need to have strength to swing and keep going, but if you swing too hard with a sword, you'll throw yourself off balance and thus be exposed and leave parts of yourself vulnerable to attack. That's simply how it is. It's all about aim, precision, pacing, speed, feinting when necessary, skill. Most weapons are skill-based in that sense. But again, strength is more fun to calculate. And of course, hitting something really hard with a sword does cut through it eventually, if you do it correctly. But again, that's an issue with like the mechanics of gameplay in general. So it's hard to really level up skill with a sword beyond, Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. 73. The best way to avoid tokenism is multiple characters. Yeah, I agree with that. That's fair.
Skip that question as well.
To avoid tokenism, just include a diverse cast of characters who are all different, and include multiple characters from the same group. That's simple. You want to avoid having a token black character? Have multiple black characters.
I wanted to name my son after my favorite author, but she didn't want to name our son J.R.R., so we just named him Token.
That being said, of course, some stories don't allow for a large cast, and that's worth discussing too. Some stories can only fit a few characters in a narrative before it becomes overcrowded. A story like Sartre's No Exit, for example, can't really include too many characters. While a work like, say, Marquis de Sade's 120 Days of, if you know the story, you know what the last report is, only allows for a set number of characters, very specific numbers of characters, and the specifics as to who they are is kind of irrelevant, so they don't get described. Physically, anyway, outside of de Sade's special interests, we'll say. De Sade is a monster, so we won't go into that too much, but certain stories do require you to have a limited cast of characters. 12 Angry Men, for example. It's going to be 12 angry men. 74. Want an easy way to become more accustomed to diverse casts? Limit your straight white cis characters to one of each. Those can be 3 characters for each trait, or pack it all into one character, but only one of each.
What?
That's a good exercise. It's a good writing exercise if you're struggling with diverse cast writing, but it's also not a rule to follow, because again, as you can see, sometimes a work can be a little vague as
I have
to
no clue why I censored that.
who is straight. Bisexuality, for example, is often erased when discussing characters. You look at the cast of, say, Sailor Moon, for example.
Okay.
A lot of the characters, as we've discussed in a video I've put out, which I'm going to shamelessly market here, they exhibit traits that could be seen as bisexual or biromantic even. These are traits that can be easily overlooked if they end up with a male, or if one of the girls ends up with a male love interest. You think, oh, that means they're straight, but really it could mean they're bisexual and just never get a chance to be with a girl, or never find the right partner.
All right. How about you and I dance together, Bunhead?
No, Cool. That'd be great.
So that's one of those exercises that you can easily fake. Like kind of say, oh, they're all bi. It's okay. Or you can say, doesn't count because they end up with a man. Well, it's by erasure. You know, that kind of exercise can be a little problematic, especially if someone like Lily's judging it, where she'll only judge it based on who the characters end up with, not if they're bisexual or not, which affects their character acting beyond their romantic lead. But anyway, so that's a good exercise. I wouldn't say you shouldn't do that. That's actually a pretty interesting experiment for practice. But in execution, I can see that being very sloppy, and I can see a lot of people drawing issues if you don't express gender identity and sexuality, or even race, in a way that the person reading it responds to. In the case of, biphobe, it could be someone, I digress. 75. Don't be afraid of failure and backlash. If someone is screaming at you about how a character you made is racist, that is literally free writing advice that someone is just giving you. Look on the bright side of life for a change. Yeah, Lily, why don't you look at all the criticism you receive as a bright thing? I mean, a lot of people who are criticizing you want you to be better than you are. See what I mean? Like, here's the thing. It's very easy for Lily to say, if you get criticism, that's good. Take it, use it, embrace it. I agree. You should take criticism very well. The problem is, Lily, that you're well known for being very thin-skinned. So you saying that makes it sound quite hypocritical. But again, that's actually not bad advice. If it came from anyone but Lily, I'd say listen to it. Problem is, it's Lily. She's not exactly the best mark when it comes to accepting good criticism, because she herself cannot accept criticism. 76.
Damn.
People of color and You're missing a letter there, Lily. I'll fix it for you, don't worry. People of color and LGBTQA people, QIA it should be. So, 2 letters you're missing there, Lily. People of color and LGBTQIA people are always allowed to just exist. Don't feel like you have to cover bigotry just because they're in the story. In fact, people will be happier if you don't. Because having these characters defined by suffering is itself a tired trope. A play like Angels in America would not benefit from less bigotry being incorporated, because it's about the AIDS crisis, which is a major incident in queer history. And yes, Lily, I know.
I don't know. Case by case, you can showcase the hatred. You can choose not to.
You forgot the Q, which is queer, in your QIA acronym. So I put it in for you there. Hope you don't mind. But again, bigotry is a real life thing. Some stories are just about bigotry, and that's great. Saying that stories processing bigotry, processing pain is tired is in fact a tired criticism. It's not a good thing to tell people to not express their pain on the page. You don't have to, and some stories don't need to. But stories about that pain should express that pain. You have works like, say, Love, Simon versus the book adaptation, Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda. The film version cuts out several scenes of explicit homophobia. There are scenes in the book that are actually genuinely uncomfortable to read, and the book is more effective because of it. Because it shows a more realistic portrayal of a kid being outed to a more conservative school district. Because we see these scenes, we get to understand the gravity of coming out, or being outed at all. We see why people would be afraid of saying anything. In the film, they replace this with a weird friendship drama dynamic, and that makes you feel uncomfortable because the thing they replaced it with kind of sucks. Like,
he screenshotted my emails, and he's been using them to blackmail me for months. What does that have to do with us, Simon?
The friends are upset that Simon kept a secret as opposed to, him being blackmailed by someone and then outed publicly. It makes the whole thing feel weird and confused as opposed to meaningful, which is what the book feels. Meaningful. So bigotry does have a place in storytelling. You should express these deeply uncomfortable topics in fiction. All right, 77. I just want my readers/viewers to have fun is an excellent attitude to have when it comes to storytelling. Yeah, that's fine. Hey, for certain stories, that's great. What's more fun? How do you have fun with a topic? That's important. I agree with that to an extent. For some stories, Not all stories, but some stories certainly. I wouldn't say it's a fun thing to put in, say, Martyrs. Some stories are disturbing. A film like Irreversible, for example, is not fun for anyone to watch. When Wes Craven made the film The Last House on the Left, he recalled an anecdote after a certain scene that takes place in the middle of the film. If you've seen the film, you know what scene I'm referring to.
When it was all over, we broke for lunch. Everybody was covered with artificial blood, and I just remember everybody went off by themselves, and nobody ate.
No one had fun making that film. No one enjoys that film, but it is a great film nonetheless because some films.
I can't believe you watched this whole video. Of course,
topics.
I'm a real professional.
Some stories are fun, some are not. You just gotta know what film you're making, or what book you're writing, or what game you're developing, what story you're telling, and tell it the best
know yourself.
you can. 78. As a general rule, slice of life has always been a more popular genre than action adventure.
That's not true. That's not true at all, actually. I have no clue where this person is taking this from. Citation needed.
This is wrong.
Mature animation sims will often...
That's just... No, that's... What?
point to Studio Ghibli as the gold standard
Where did she take those cakes from? I don't know, from her ass, I think.
for adult animation, but I always ask them what their favorite Ghibli film is when they do that, because 9 times out of 10 they'll say Princess Mononoke. A pretty standard kids action adventure film.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
Always. Good question. Good phrasing there. Let's go back in the history books. Le Morte Author is one of the most well-known and beloved works of fiction ever written. It is not slice of life.
But the superficially mature is something that only young teenagers enjoy. And that's fine, most people grow out of their that's for babies phase, but even when they do, they probably still find a certain childish glee in splatter movies.
And the most popular films of all time. Look at the most profitable films recently, right? They're all action films, they're all science fiction, they're all great sweeping romances with drastic impactful endings like Titanic. They are not Azumanga Daioh. They're not Lucky Star. Though I love Azumanga Daioh and Lucky Star. They're not Friends. It's not that. They're not just rom-coms. In fact, the rom-com is basically dead right now. When was the last rom-com you saw that was popular on TV? I mean, I guess Abbott Elementary, but that's the exception that proves the rule. Sitcoms are nice. They're slice of life. But they're not the defining, massive thing you think they are. And even then, it's not the fact that they're slices of life that make them popular, it's the characters people gravitate towards. The Office is beloved not because it's slice of life, but because the characters are so likable. 79. Feature creep is a problem in storytelling as well. You don't have to cram every single idea, reference, and homage you can think of into a story. You can save ideas for another time. Yes, that's true, but who does that? You know? Who puts every single homage to every work of fiction?
Homage.
That's not common, all right? And the works that do that are Joss Whedon works, basically. Like, what? You mean like Buffy? Like Buffyisms? No. You mean like Anno Dracula, the book that has just about every single vampire in fiction in it, including Dracula.
Yeah, this guy's a little
Count
pretentious.
Orlok, Lestat.
Homage.
This is a real book. The list of characters. I'm going to slide them on screen right here. There's a lot of characters.
It is long. It's 2 hours, 26 minutes.
That's all fine and good. But that's abnormal. That's not usual. Most fantasy writers don't include references to every work of fiction that they've ever written. Maybe they'll include a sandworm from Dune, or they might have like, you know, a Hobbit character. But most fantasy works don't include references to every single work of fiction ever either. They might include a few choice references, but that's about it. I don't know who you're trying to help with this. 80. We're getting towards the end now, folks.
Nice.
D&D
Finally.
alignments are terrible metrics for character design. They're meant as a quick reference for improvisation in a TTRPG environment and shouldn't be taken outside of that environment. To an extent, I think I agree with you, but only to an extent.
I think it's a big simplification. The
D&D alignments
character alignment.
only refer to the lawful and chaotic versus good and evil metrics of morality.
I think Americans would pronounce it homage. No, I think Americans would pronounce it homage. Yeah, they really skip the H.
Which is itself a very flawed thing most TTRPG players ignore. Do you mean D&D character rolling, like designs, like the stats and the race and the classes, right? Well, then those are archetypes. Those are stock, which you can build upon. Having a warrior, a ranger, a rogue, a warlock, a bard.
Yeah, I know, right?
The beginnings of a
story.
Mean,
this person says homage. Okay,
that's great. I mean, look at the D&D movie. You know, the Dungeons and Dragons movie, Honor Among Thieves, uses these tropes as a starting point for their characters, but none of them are super faithful to the rules of those classes. For example, druids can't typically transform into owlbears. For a bard, Chris Pine's character acts way more like a rogue and can't do any bardic magic in the process. So again, these are starting points, not final destinations. All right, moving to the end here now. We're getting close. I'm excited. It's been a long journey. 81.
It has.
When writing... Okay, so it seems like you're deliberately leaving out queer and intersex from the LGBTQIA anagram, but I'll fix it for you, don't worry. When writing LGBTQIA characters, stay as far away from Rocky Horror Picture Show as you possibly can. Some gay people hold it up as a meaningful part of our culture. It is not. It's a trans-misogynistic nightmare made by an actual TERF, not a reference guide for anything. Lily, shut the fuck up. Seriously, shut up. Yeah, Rocky Horror Picture Show is a piece of work that's dated. I have no idea what you're referring to when you're saying the creator's a TERF. I'm sure he said something stupid in the history, and he's probably wrong for it. I'm not going to question it. I'll give you that one, Lily. He probably said something awful. But to argue that it's not an important part of our history when it was one of the first mainstream pieces of media who become successful. And yes, Lily, it was successful. It has never been off the theater circuit since it debuted. It is one of the most financially successful films in relation to its budget versus its gross ever. It is up there. It may not be Avengers Endgame, but if you compare the price it costs to make and the price it brings in, from merchandise to reshows to college audiences, it's pretty successful. And that was a major work of media. To undercut it because it's aged a little poorly is, I think, a bad idea. Because what you're doing is you're ignoring the good it served in history. You can also say the same about any of John Waters' works. What about Hairspray? What about Pink Flamingos? What about other works that were more explicitly queer back in the day, like Howl, for example? Again, all of these are queer works that do have some problems, some by design, some accidentally, but it's still a major component of the culture. You can't simply look at something that's major in the history books and just dismiss it because you personally think it was bad today. I know certain words are nowadays seen as more of a slur, but at the time that was the accepted terminology, the accepted vernacular. Are you saying that we should hold people accountable for the language they used when the language they used has since changed in today's world? That's a tricky topic. And you think it's also wrong for queer people to reclaim slurs used against them? Again, that might be why you ignore the word queer when you have LGBTQIA in your whole acronym and you knock off that in intersex. But again, those are components of queer history you have to reckon with. That's simple. And has some good music. That's the other thing too. Here we go. Now you're getting into... Okay. Now I see. It was building up to the queer discussion. Let's go into some queer discourse. Let's do this. 82. The Q slur as a concept tactically reinforces heteronormativity by casting LGBTA people as inherently strange. In no big deal representation, the word should be avoided. Normalizing LGBTA people and the Q word are like oil and water and don't go together. Shut the fuck up.
I hate it when people decide to Just X some letters from the acronym. I just leave it alone, okay? Leave it alone.
Up again. You're fucking wrong. You're so fucking wrong, actually.
Okay, I'm gonna go to the toilet real quick. I wanna pee. Can I pee? Can I be a peanut for once in my life? Why is Q a part of it? Because queer people. Be right back. Not exactly. For example, someone that cross-dresses could be considered queer, but it doesn't follow that they have to be gay. There you go. I returned and I have answered your question. Who cares? Who cares about what? Greater rank creators. They asked, so I'm answering. If someone asks, then clearly somebody cares.
Why you're wrong.
This was in 2004, where even in Canadian schools it wasn't uncommon to see gay or faggot being thrown around as casual insults.
The word queer, yes, was used as a slur against LGBTQA people for years. However,
the word fag has been reclaimed.
It since has been reclaimed by the LGBTQIA people. Now, the word queer refers to anyone who does not feel they fit into any one category of the LGBTQIA body fairly. They may have maybe they're bi, but they're not sure. The people who don't feel that they fit in perfectly with any one category and thus use the word to kind of occupy their nebulous sort of position. It's why words like bisexual and pansexual are so similar, yet have distinct meanings that are important to those who embrace those labels. To tell someone that they're wrong for identifying as queer is, in fact, bigoted. Because you're saying that their identity is invalid. Because, Lily, you think you know better than everyone else, don't you?
So I think you can appreciate where I'm coming from, being told that this was where representation needed to be, and everything that had ever surpassed it just doesn't count. Even if you like this, you understand why this can be frustrating, right? Especially as more and more people...
Okay, Conrad, and gay means happy, I don't care. This is a silly argument, as always, from you.
People are genuinely saying shit like, we have too much good gay rep, and we need more Rocky Horror.
Of course.
Yes, it does. Well, then there you go.
You know more than the people who you're insulting know about themselves. And you think you can police their language. You see, I don't care what you say about books. I think you're wrong about your opinions about how books are wrong. But that's only as much as the conversation of literature does. And I think literature is a conversation. Media discussion is a conversation. An engaging one that I love to hold. And now I'm talking about this topic right now. But when it comes to policing people's identities, that's something I take a little more seriously. And in fact, I think that you should take more seriously too. You are not an expert on queer history, though you like to profess yourself as one. Your knowledge is very limited. You are not well read in the topic. You have not read even a fraction of the queer texts that you should read to understand queer history all the way back to cowboys being gay in the Old West. Weimar Republic, you know nothing about that. You know nothing about the media and arts that flourished leading up to the AIDS crisis that was snuffed out by that pandemic. You know nothing about this. You know nothing about Howl or the Beat Poets. You know nothing about the Hays Code. You know nothing about the actors who were forcibly closeted. You know nothing about McCarthyism. You know nothing about anything. You do not know that, say, Mary Shelley was a bisexual who wrote in her letters how bisexual she was. You do not know the struggles that Oscar Wilde went through, that Bram Stoker went through.
Oh, someone wrote, Message Bagby. Hello, mate, love your stream, which is why I followed. I would like to be friends and fan. Mind adding me on Discord. Oh my gosh, a bot has entered the Twitch chat. My goodness.
That James Wales went through. You do not know any of this because your knowledge of queer history begins and ends with everything you found on Tumblr.
The fact that anyone ever looked at this shit and thought to praise it as a good thing should be an embarrassment for everyone.
Do not pretend that you know more than that, because you have never demonstrated anything more than that. And I know this because you have never talked about it.
Whoa.
Do not lecture to those who look for community and prey upon their insecurities, which you do. So seriously, when I tell you to shut the fuck up, I mean it. All right, let's move on to your opinions on books. All right, 83. Oh, I'm glad we're going with a heavy topic right now. Rape is an unforgivable crime, more so than killing. Killing can potentially be justified in a story without becoming a villain. Rape cannot.
What? Telling stories is not about... Stories are not told to justify actions. That is such a stupid thing to say. Not all actions presented in stories are justified.
Yeah, there's no argument there. I agree with you on that one. It is one of the worst things a person can do. Sexual assault is an evil unlike any other. And works that deal with that assault often grapple with characters regretting their actions only to realize there's no forgiveness for them. A great work like this is the story I Spit on Your Grave, an exploitation horror film from the 70s. It is what many call a rape and revenge movie. It's not a film that's uplifting or charming. There are several men who violate the main character.
You could just say assault.
Hurt her. But there's one character among the group who's a little sympathetic. He's a little hesitant. He's the good one, quote unquote. And it's only because of the quote unquote good one that this woman lives. The woman survives and enacts revenge on all of the people who assaulted her. She kills the good one first, because even if he was the good one, he still helped in the assault.
I could just say rape, yeah, but people care a lot about their monetizations.
And is deserving of the same fate, though admittedly his death is the least violent. She reserves the more gruesome ones for the more vicious and unrepentant members, but he still gets the same punishment in the end, because there is no turning back from that. The same thing happens in Last House on the Left. There is a quote-unquote nicer one of the criminals, and he dies. Simple, because there is no real redemption for what you do if you do something like that. 84. Oh, I'm going to disagree with you on this.
The purist.
Sex scenes are never necessary. You want to include one because you're horny.
That's not true. That's stupid. Again, what about if you want to really describe the intimacy between characters?
Then more power to you.
You write about intimacy.
Justified as important to the story, will only get you laughed at. Okay, so recently the movie Oppenheimer has a very crucial sex scene in it. One that is actually relevant to the plot. It gets brought up in hearings. It gets brought up in the character conflicts between Oppenheimer and his wife. It is a major plot point, and a character actually dies because said sex scenes are big plays. Because a character... Listen, if you watch Oppenheimer, it's a great movie, but sex scenes can be very important to a plot. Sometimes more so than others. Some sex scenes are exploitative, undeniably so, but others not so much. And some films explore sexual dynamics. Some books explore sexual dynamics, and thus need to explore these topics in a way that's meaningful and important. These sequences can be relevant depending on the plot you're telling. In fact, some scenes can be completely uncomfortable. They don't have to be quote-unquote erotic. They can be miserable. To say they don't have any impact on the story is dumb, quite frankly. You can never say the only reason you want to do this is because you want to see people have sex. That's not true. There's many cases where the scene is just there because it's a scene that needs to show the character dynamics. It can be an extension of character dynamics in play, of the conflict in play, and of the relationship that's changing and developing over the course of the story. It can also be seen as a climax, no more than a fight scene. Except, a little different. And in some cases, like in The Terminator, it can be the thing that saves the universe. Or in the case of Legend of the Overfiend, the thing that dooms the universe, which, I digress. Two very different 80s genre films. 85. Strong characters can still cry and need support from others. Vulnerability is not...
Is there going to be gay sex?
Not a character flaw. Agreed. No argument there. Lily, another win for you there. That's fine. 86. Peak TV is a fancy way of saying addiction-fueled misery porn.
What?
I have no idea what you're even talking about.
Same. What?
The fuck, Lily? That's ridiculous. I'm not even trying to how to criticize that. That's just weird. Like, what are you talking about? But you mean shows like Breaking Bad are a little more miserable than not? It's ridiculous. Here we go. An explanation of what she's talking about. 87. Addiction-based storytelling relies on serialization, cliffhangers, shocking twist, constantly raised stakes, and an obsession with foreshadowing to get people to watch not because they're enjoying themselves, but because they're stuck on attention high.
What?
Or they like the characters and want to see them get out okay. The original word for the cliffhanger was with the film serials, where at the end of each serial episode, the character that audiences, especially kids, loved would be stuck in a situation where they would be dangling over a cliff or in a car that falls off the road. And to tune in next week to see what happens because they want to make sure the character survived. It's not the tension high. It's that they like the characters and want them to be okay. Good storytelling relies on you liking the characters and feeling like the plots at stake matter. The escalation of plot isn't...
Why does she take her own experience with something and says it's what everyone experiences? It's because, I don't know, narcissist? That's the only explanation that I can come up with.
always the problem. Sometimes it's more personal stakes. People watch stories not because they're addicted to the high of the thrill, like it's a roller coaster. They watch stories because they like the characters and want to see them get through. You have a weird perspective of what high stakes means and why people like them. How can you tell people what's in a good story if you yourself don't understand what people watch stories for? Oh, 87, there's more to this, by the way. By the end, the viewer is only watching for closure because they've already invested so much time and they need their fix in order to feel like it was worth it. This is the same business model that soap operas use. I've already explained why that's nonsense. Let's move on. And soap operas, they're just day to day. They're just something you watch to pass the time for the most part. Though some soap operas, again, like Dallas, have a whole mystery set up because you want to know what happened to a character and who's involved. It's the mystery. It's the puzzle. It's a simple piece of storytelling that anyone can tell you works because people want to know what happened. It's not complicated. 88. If the sunk cost fallacy didn't exist, shows like Steven Universe and Game of Thrones would have been canceled by season 2. Lily, are you under the impression that Steven Universe's first season had a lot of tension? Also, Steven Universe season 2 was renewed because people kept watching. But kids watched it. They watched it from day to day. They watched it on TV. It's not... What does that even mean? Also, Game of Thrones is good. And Steven Universe is good. Something being long doesn't mean it's bad.
I didn't like the ending of Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones was renewed for seasons after season 1 because people wanted to see what happened. In fact, more people were watching it. People didn't just jump on board for the first season and stuck all the way to the end. They heard from their friends it was good and hopped on later seasons to watch it. The ratings went up. So... I don't think you understand viewership patterns either, or why people watch something. Again, it's the characters,
so brave.
It's the conflict, it's the stories, it's the moments people talk about as being so good. You got to see the rest of it to follow it and understand what's going on. Sunk cost. If it was just sunk cost fallacy, they'd watch it, nod their heads, turn it off, and not discuss it outside of that viewership moment. They wouldn't be. You live on Tumblr. You know this for a fact. There are multiple blogs devoted to something, showcasing all the small moments in slow down GIFs just to illustrate what happened. You have Reddit subcommunities discussing and theorizing things. You have tons of YouTube channels discussing it. This is not out of a sunk cost fallacy. This is out of genuine enthusiasm for the works because the works got people interested in the characters, in the ideas. The problem is, Lily, you don't understand why people like things.
Oh, gosh.
And furthermore, stuff like Friends is more of a sunk cost fallacy because nothing changes. There's no consistent element to it. Sure, you might like the characters, but what makes the whole, I don't know, Chandler and Monica, I don't know the ship names in Friends. What makes them any different than seeing who gets on the Iron Throne? Or seeing what happens with Pink Diamond? You know?
Okay, move on from Friends.
Nothing whatsoever. All right, 89. Hardcore fans would tell you that continuity is the most important thing. They're wrong.
What?
What does that mean to you, continuity?
I don't know.
Continuity just means a story that progresses from
Consistency?
point to point to point to tell a good narrative. Now, continuity errors can happen, yeah, especially with long-form storytelling. Does that make it the most important thing in the world? Probably not, but it's an important thing nonetheless. Because stories should have culmination. They should have a conclusion. They should reward you for watching. So, again, another non sequitur point. Stories shouldn't flow. Stories shouldn't build upon what came before. Okay. This is too political is a complaint only made by conservatives when a story acknowledges that non-white people and non-straight people exist. The existence of other kinds of people is not political. Ignore these complaints. Yeah, it's fair. I don't agree. You're right on that one too. A lot of people who say things are political just mean they see that black people exist in a medium and they get pissy about it. Most often, they don't even discuss any actual politics involved. 91. The Little Mermaid and Cinderella are more feminist than Beauty and the Beast. I feel like at that point you're just trolling and you don't know what that actually means. I'll allow you to explain at some later point because...
True. Well said. The random 3PO says the world really gets its mileage on the Lily Orchard writing tips. She shed them out in Robinson-induced fighting instead, and bam, evergreen React content. I have not had much exposure to this Lily Orchard person. I don't know much. This is my first contact with the person.
Unless you clarify that statement, that's just your opinion, and I don't care. All right, 92. If you want to know when to change a trans character's pronouns in the narration, doing so at the moment where they realize who they are and admit to themselves out loud is chef's kiss. Again, no complaint there. That's absolutely fair.
I struggle to read because I'm old and decrepit.
93. As long as it isn't harmful or bigoted, you don't have to justify story decisions made on the basis of self-indulgence. Lily, you've just spent 92 entries telling people why they should do things based on your instructions. Self-indulgence is okay and a trump card to all that just proves that you don't believe a single thing you just said. Meaning, all of this list is entirely pointless.
Sugar wants to do everything in Steven Universe. She wants the villains to be space Nazis so they can be intimidating and menacing, but she also wants to have sympathetic villains, which bad writers translate as, I'm sad, feel bad for me, and doesn't bother to consider that those two don't mesh. The entire Pink Diamond arc was written because Sugar wanted her shocking twist. The way in which it so thoroughly pisses on everything that's come before it didn't matter to her. The twist was all that mattered. It's very reminiscent of how fanfiction is written, going with literally every idea you come up with and no regard toward whether it actually fits in the story. Subverting tropes purely for the sake of subverting tropes, going with the idea that shocking twists and vague mysteries are good purely on principle and not taking execution into effect. Sugar writes like someone who has never written before or even taken a basic writing class. And that makes sense because she's not a writer. She's an artist.
No politics today?
94.
No, I'll do it during the day. I'm too tired. I got tired. Was planning to do some more stuff, but I'm a little bit nervous about the article as well.
Vampires / werewolves are not inherently LGBTQA coded, and doing so is an example of othering. They work better as metaphors for aristocracy and predators, respectfully, than as the underclass. Why? Why do you think that? The problem is, Lily, you're acting as though something is a rule and must always work one way because you believe that these concepts must only function in one manner in every work. There are works that completely change how werewolves and vampires are perceived. The vampires in Near Dark, for example, or The Lost Boys, do not function as aristocracy at all. There's just no possible way you can watch Near Dark or The Lost Boys and think the vampires therein are aristocratic. Nor can you watch The Wolfman, the Lon Chaney movie, and act like the Wolfman is a predator. It is a very different allegory, especially considering that The Wolfman was written and directed by a Jewish man who left Germany during the Weimar Republic and saw the rise of a certain fascist party.
Nazi party.
The werewolves mean something very specific in The Wolfman, and why the people are terrified of the werewolf, including the werewolf himself. Has nothing to do with predators. Has to do with actual politics. Politics that you ignored that aren't very subtle. Sometimes they can work as aristocracy or predators, but not all the time. And I don't think you know actually how werewolf stories or vampire stories exist, so 95. Some of the best stories ever made were written as an act of spite. Okay, that's a meaningless statement.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, some are acts of spite, some aren't.
Okay, if it's a meaningless statement, then move on.
Cool. Whatever.
Move on.
I have no opinion on that one.
Okay.
Besides, we're almost done with this, and we'll get this over with. 96. Any system of government, with the exception of fascism, can exist in a positive or negative context. Monarchies are not always inherently evil, and democracies are not always inherently good. Write accordingly. Yeah, but if you ignore certain components of the political structure at play, it can be a little problematic. And again,
this is painful to watch.
A lot of monarchies kind of lean into fascism too, or fascist ideology, or absolutism, which is just as bad. 97. Lesbian still on good terms with ex-boyfriend from before coming out is a really cute friendship trope, and vice versa. Yeah, it's fair. I have no argument with that. It's a cute idea. 98. The only real difference between an extremely close platonic relationship and a romantic relationship is what people involved choose to call it. Best friends are not something that should ever be prefixed with the word just. No, actually, Lily, they're very different things. There's tons of different forms of love and affection. Just because it's not that they're just friends. I mean, platonic friendship can be just as important as a romance, but they're different forms of connections. They're very different, actually. This sounds like a very and people have different ways of seeing them personally.
Yeah.
What a friend means to one person is different from what a friend means to another person. These dynamics are what people inherently messy in so many ways, and what makes these conflicts so difficult to discuss. Because, quite frankly, things are different for different sets of people. The fact you're saying this shows you don't understand that, which doesn't surprise me, given how you treat your friends, or rather ex-friends. 99. Normalize friends saying, I love you to each other. Yeah, that's fine. No argument there. Because I love you means different things to different people. 100. If you write a 100-tweet long thread of writing advice, you are a huge loser with way too much free time on your hands. Get back to work and do something productive with your time. And 101, tips and rules are two different words. So, that's a meaningless thing, more self-deprecating to kind of ease people into not criticizing her. I, however, have criticized her. And what have we learned today?
You're so mean.
From all this rambling, what did we actually figure out? That 1, Lily does not understand the mechanics of storytelling. That was pretty obvious. 2, Lily acts as though her absolute tips are in some ways important. And though she says these are not rules, she insults your intelligence and calls you a morally, ethically bad person for doing things she finds objectable, which is all Lily's whole sub-brand. Throughout her years online, Lily Orchard has continually hid behind the defense of, oh, it's just a review, no big deal, to mock people outright. She'll call Rebecca Sugar a fascist sympathizer.
Someone calls Sugar a fascist because of what they saw in Steven Universe, then that is a rod she created for her own damn back. She made the decision to give the Diamonds a galaxy-wide body count and then spend an extreme amount of time talking about how sad they are.
She'll insult storyboard illustrators and act like they have no creative talent. She'll act like an elitist snob and act like certain works that
incredible video for jobless people. True.
Don't fit her parameters are inherently worse off for it.
It isn't watching Bluey that makes people think you're an emotionally stunted man-child who refuses to grow up. It's watching Attack on Titan that does that. It's watching Steven Universe and making very sincere arguments that it's a very profound show for adults.
Oh my god, shut up.
That does that. It's when you're asked what your favorite magical girl show is and you say the one where little girls get brutally tortured that does that. These things have always, and I do mean always, been a child badly applying mommy's makeup and wearing high heels that are way too big so they can be a real grown-up.
I think that Lily Orchard is a very immature person who needs to grow up. The first step to doing that is to interpreting media outside of the circles that she herself argues are best. If you want to only live in your isolated bubble, that's fine. Don't be a critic. That's simple. Be more well-read. Be experienced in the arts. But you're not going to. Because
Random Flipio says, Imo, the writing tips aren't sincere. She's just rage baiting. The insults are sincere though. Like, it's her real opinions, but she doesn't think the tips are actually good for writing. Yeah, I agree. Almost none of it had to do anything with writing.
Because you refuse any criticism. Despite criticizing everyone else and saying everyone else should just take criticism, you yourself refuse to engage with it and refuse to accept it. I guarantee, and you can use this clip in the next few weeks, that Lily Orchard will post about this video in the weeks to come and act like I was hating her or being trans-misogynistic or something. Because I said that
Conrad is to me.
She was wrong about her opinions on writing and cited references outside of the things that she's referenced to illustrate why I felt so. And again, There's the ethical issues. Discussions are beyond media, discussions about people, about ideologies, about concepts that you yourself choose to continue to push onto an impressionable audience of those who are isolated and don't know any better. You are acting as though queer history must be what you define it as when you yourself are so poorly read on the topic that there could be a textbook written about your misconceptions and misconstruing of information.
Yeah.
I fear for anyone who has actually believed your nonsense and what they can tell other people. And with that, I'm going to say, if someone you know...
Okay, that's it. So, that's been fun. It's been a little bit of a stream. I thought I'd go for longer, but I have to rest a bit. So I'm rating you to Mercado Gaming, and I'll see you later, okay? Bye-bye. I'm sure all these people that I rate will spontaneously return the favor one day, and I will receive so many new viewers that I will not know what to do with them. It's gonna be it's gonna be the happiest day of my streaming career. And till then, until then, bye-bye. Pick me energy with those ratings. I know. That is me. The pick me up. Okay, bye-bye. Bye-bye.